Chapter 1175. General Fong, what do you mean? Shi Hung looked at Fong Dingshan's expression and asked in a puzzled tone. But his expression was natural. It was obvious that he was thinking the same thing. What else? If it weren't for the 5-star army, we would have been mortal enemies with the Walla cavalry. The reason why we joined forces is because the current 5-star army is easier to bully. Once they are eliminated, I'm afraid that our cooperation will end. It's inevitable that we will fall out. After Fong Dingshan said this, he narrowed his eyes and looked at Shi Hung and Xinguang. He didn't believe that these two people didn't think of this. In fact, Shi Hung had already received the decree of the Daizong Emperor. He could join forces with the Wara army, but it was only a limited alliance. He had to be prepared to fall out with them at any time. After all, when it came to hatred, the hatred between the two sides was far greater than the hatred between Bai Ming and Yang Qindong. In the past, the Wara army used to harvest grain at the border of the Great Ming grassland. Now that the Great Ming dynasty was divided into the north and the south, they were the initiators. Not long ago, Fong Dingshan led 70,000 Liaodin cavalry to harvest grain in the Wara army's territory, killing their people and stealing their livestock. It was impossible to say that there was no hatred in everyone's heart. Shi Hung was naturally very clear about these things. He knew that the hatred between the two sides was already irreconcilable, but there was one thing he couldn't figure out. Why did the Wara army choose to attack them at this time? Did they want to join forces to deal with the 5-star army? Shi Hung raised the question in his heart and then looked at Fong Dingshan, wanting to see what the other party thought. Marquis, don't look at me. The reason why they did this is probably because they think that we can't take down the first city. Since that's the case, our allied forces will have to disperse sooner or later. If they can cause us some trouble at this time, that's naturally good. By the way, Marquis, please don't forget that the Shajing city and Jingzhou city that we're occupying used to belong to the Tile tribe. Speaking of this matter, Fong Dingshan did not even hesitate. It was clear that he was not optimistic about this alliance. This had a lot to do with Fong Dingshan's personality. He was originally a very arrogant person. In his eyes, only Bai Ming was orthodox. The 5-star army, the World Wara, and even the Southern Ming dynasty would all submit to Bai Ming soon. His mission was to conquer them, defeat them, and establish an immortal achievement. With such thoughts in mind, he had long regarded everyone as his enemy. In that case, it would be normal for the enemy to do anything to harm him. There was nothing strange or suspicious about it. If these thoughts were known by Su Dei, he would be very happy. This proved that his plan to sow discord had succeeded. You're right. It seems that we have to be careful of them. By the way, General Tsin, how confident are you in taking down the first city? Shi Hung nodded in agreement. What Fong Dingshan said was roughly the same as what he thought. However, there was one difference. In his eyes, the 5-star army was a bigger enemy. No matter how strong the World Wara was, they were only able to move freely on the grassland. In contrast, Bugnam of Gojoseon had the ability to penetrate the hinterland of Bai Ming. This was what he needed to guard against the most. When he thought of Bugnam of Gojoseon, it reminded him of the first city. He wanted to know how confident he was in taking down the first city. It should be soon. This time, Xinguang was not as confident as before. It was not because of anything else. It was because the difficulty of attacking the city had increased over the past few days. The 5-star army that was guarding the city seemed to have been injected with chicken blood. They began to regain their vitality and were not as easy to deal with as they were in the beginning. However, with the advantage of besieging the city, he firmly believed that the other party would not be able to hold on for long. Therefore, it was certain that they would be able to take down the city, provided that they had enough time. Then let's speed up. Shi Hung did not intend to urge Xinguang. These days, the momentum of the siege was still very fierce. As the commander, he knew very well in his heart. Of course, he did not know that there was not much time left for him. By the way, General Fong, what do you think we should do next against the world Wara? Shi Heng did not forget the purpose of asking the two of them to discuss this matter. What else can we do? We'll just have to deal with whatever comes our way. In the future, we will increase the number of soldiers guarding the provisions. In addition, I will also send people to keep an eye on them. Fang Dingshan said with a relaxed expression. If the other party still had 150,000 cavalrymen, he would be nervous. But now there were only 50,000 of them, which was even less than him. He was really not afraid. This was also because the emperor did not give an order. Otherwise, he would have dared to kill these people. Fang Dingshan said it so casually that Shi Heng also breathed a sigh of relief. This was the advantage of having strong soldiers. When dealing with things, they would have a lot more confidence. Well, then we have to pay attention to the world Wara's every move at all times. Of course, the main thing is to attack the city. As long as we take down the first city, even if they have other ideas, they will have to hold back. When we deal with the 5-star army, it will be time to go back and deal with them. General Tsin, please pay attention to this point. After going around in circles, they finally returned to the problem of how to take down the first city. Yes, I will do my best, but now we are a little short of troops. Can we see if we can transfer some from the rear? Xinguang asked tentatively. These days, although the 5-star army that was guarding the city was under great pressure, they also suffered a lot of losses. The number of wounded had exceeded 30,000, and the other soldiers were also exhausted. If they could get a fresh army to join them now, then they would have a greater chance of taking down the city. Shi Heng was the military commander personally appointed by the emperor. He was in charge of all the military affairs at the front line. Only he had the final say on things like transferring troops. After hearing Xinguang's request, he asked very seriously, General Tsin, how many more troops do you need? Can you guarantee that you can take down the first city? Hearing that there was hope, Xinguang said with some excitement, there is no problem in taking down the first city. I can feel that the enemy's strength has been greatly reduced. Now, it is just a little bit away. If Marquis can give me an additional 100,000 troops, then I am confident that I can take down the city within 5 days. If it is not possible, I am willing to offer my head. This was equivalent to giving a military order. If there were really 100,000 fresh troops, they could attack from the 4 city gates regardless of day or night. It was really possible to take down the city in 5 days. Oh, so confident. That's good. Marquis will immediately give the order to transfer troops. Shi Heng was also very excited when he heard this. Although the transfer of 100,000 infantrymen was not part of the plan, it would be a great achievement if they could take down the first city. Not only would he be able to report to the emperor, but he would also be able to obtain a great achievement. Thank you, Hou Yi. Hearing that the matter was approved, Xinguang was also very excited. The meeting ended. Shi Heng found his messenger and took out the tiger troop talisman. He asked them to go to Tulu City, Sambilachuan City, Shajing City, and Jingzhou City to transfer troops. Tulu City was the fortress of the rear base of the Baiming army. There were originally 50,000 soldiers there. They were responsible for guarding the provisions, and if there were any changes, they would be reinforcements. When Shi Heng gave the order, 40,000 of the 50,000 soldiers were transferred. Sambilachuan City had fewer soldiers. There were only 30,000 soldiers guarding the city. Among them, there were 10,000 wounded soldiers who had retreated from the front line. Shi Heng gave the order, and 20,000 healthy soldiers were transferred away, leaving only 10,000 injured soldiers behind. If there were no external forces, there wouldn't be any problems. There were 60,000 soldiers out of 100,000. The last 40,000 soldiers could only be sent to Shajing City and Jingzhou City. This made it difficult for Rong Shao, who was in charge here. As a businessman, he knew that if he wanted to expand his business, he could not do without his own people in the imperial court. How could he be considered one of his own people? Of course, it was not as good as being an official himself. Once he became a pillar of the country, who would dare to cause trouble for him in the future. After a discussion with the Rong family, Rong Shao finally gave Shi Hung 200,000 taels of silver. In addition to his contribution in successfully instigating the rebellion of the two cities, he was promoted to general of the two cities. He became Shi Heng's favorite person. When Shi Hung gave the order, Rong Shao knew that his chance to perform had come. He called Su Yuan over and said with a troubled expression, "The opportunity is here. However, when we negotiated with the Spirit-Severing Army, we said that they wouldn't go against the 5-star army. What do you think we should do?" This. Su Yuanjiang furrowed his brows. After following Shabi for such a long time, he knew the general's temper. He was a man of his word, based on how much Yang Qindong valued him. Even without the agreement, Yang Qindong probably wouldn't send troops out due to guilt, let alone with the agreement in hand. However, Su Yuan knew that Rong Shao didn't call him over to see him shake his head. Rong Shao wanted him to come up with a plan. Well, the Han people have a saying, times are different now. The situation is different, so the original agreement will have to be changed. What's more, he's been drinking wine every day, and with Wu Xiaoyi's death, the other 3 teachers have a lot of opinions about him. I think it's better to bypass him and talk to the teachers directly. Is that okay? Rong Shao's eyes lit up when he heard that. Why not? How about this? I will talk to the 3 teachers first. However, I would like to ask Lord Rong to remove the people who are monitoring the 3 division masters, as well as those who are responsible for sowing discord. Since we are here to talk, we must show our sincerity. Su Yuan thought for a moment and proposed his idea. That's not a problem. Rong Shao agreed. He had no other choice, although the method of sowing discord had some effect now. As long as he was given time, he was confident that he could take over the military power of the 3 division commanders. Then he could find a reason to arrest them. However, with Shi Heng's order and a short 3 days, he did not have the patience to wait for the next batch of soldiers. Chapter 1176. Su Yuan left Rong Shao's place and went straight to the residence of Kang Ji, the commander of the new 2nd Army's 1st Cavalry Division in Shajing City. In the Kang residence, Kang Ji was very surprised when he found out that Su Yuan was outside the residence and wanted to see him. He couldn't figure out why the other party wanted to see him at this time. Well, since he's here, I'll invite him in. Kang Ji and Su Yuan sat opposite each other in the living room of the residence. The other bodyguards were all removed from the living room. This was Su Yuan's request. After all, he was here to ask for help. Not only would he lose face if he said some soft words in front of so many people, he was also afraid that he would be put on the spot. Without anyone else around, Su Yuan didn't care about his reputation and directly made his request. Mr. Kang, I'm sorry for offending you before. It wasn't my idea to send people to monitor your residence. And those people who tried to sow discord in the division weren't sent by me either. I've already protested to Rong Shao about this matter. He has already promised that these people will all be recalled. I hope that this matter won't affect our friendship. Kang Ji was shocked that Su Yuan was so humble right from the start. It wasn't a big deal to monitor his own people, and he didn't intend to do anything when the time wasn't right. But those people who tried to sow discord really gave him a headache. They spread unfavorable words about him everywhere in the division. At first, it was fine. With his usual character, no one believed those words. But some things were afraid of being repeated. If he said too much, it was inevitable that people would believe him. Over time, there were people in the division who started to have ulterior motives. It was just that they didn't have enough evidence. In addition, this matter was instigated by Rong Shao. Even if he wanted to make a move, he didn't have the right opportunity. Originally, he thought that if this continued, he wouldn't be able to regain the command power when he really needed to use the army one day. He didn't expect that Su Yuan would solve all these problems and worries. This was an unexpected surprise. Of course, since he did such a big thing for him, he must have a favor to ask of him. Kang Ji didn't believe that a pie would fall from the sky. So although he was happy, he pretended to be calm and said, "Mr. Su, we're not outsiders. Just tell me, what price do you need me to pay?" "Mr. Kang, you're really straightforward. It's like this. The military operation to attack the first city is going smoothly, and it looks like we will be able to take it in a few days. Considering the problem of maintaining the safety of that place in the future, Admiral Sherhung ordered our new Second Army to send 20,000 soldiers to assist. The mission given was to send 40,000 soldiers. Rong Xiao had 20,000 soldiers. Now that there were only 20,000 soldiers left, he had to rely on the new Second Army. With the current strength of the new Second Army, there were a total of 4 divisions. If each division could send 5,000 soldiers, then the number would be enough. When he heard that the beginning city would be conquered in a few days, Kang Ji's heart started to beat more frequently and faster. If the beginning city was really conquered, then when would he be able to return to the 5-star army? Fortunately, Su Yuan's next words made Kang Ji heave a sigh of relief. At the same time, he also saw the other party's real intention. Ming did not have enough soldiers at the front line. They must have fallen into a difficult situation when attacking the beginning city. Otherwise, they would not have come to beg him. After knowing the other party's purpose, Kang Ji felt relieved and started to pick up his gun. "Mr. Su, I'm sure you still remember the agreement that the military commander signed with you. The first clause is that we can't be enemies with the 5-star army anymore. We were forced to surrender. We've already let down Bugnam of Gojoseon. How can we go against our conscience and be enemies with them? We really can't do such a thing." Su Yuan revealed an expression that said, as expected. He knew that the other party would say this. Then he smiled and said, "Mr. Kang, you've misunderstood. Didn't I say just now? These troops are not going to fight with the 5-star army. They are only responsible for the defense of the beginning city in the future. You also know that even if there is no 5-star army on the grassland, there is still the Walla cavalry and the Mongolian cavalry from various tribes. They are not so easy to deal with. The beginning city is such a big city in front of us. If we don't have enough troops to defend it, we will face the danger of losing it at any time." The reason given by Su Yuan was very suitable. Kang Ji could not find a reason to refute it. However, their division only had more than 8,000 people. If 5,000 people were transferred away all of a sudden, their strength would be reduced by more than half. This was not what he wanted to see. It was certainly a good thing to be able to remove the people who were monitoring him and spreading rumors in the army. However, how to agree to the other party's request without being heartbroken was what Kang Ji needed to consider. He did not speak for a long time. He looked at Su Yuan and asked anxiously, "Mr. Kang, say something." "Sir Rong Xiao is still waiting for the news." "Well, it's really impossible to transfer 5,000 people from a division." Kang Ji had a rough idea in his mind in a short period of time. He finally spoke. As soon as he spoke, Su Yuan was immediately unhappy. "Mr. Kang, what do you mean? I just said that we are not going to be enemies with the 5-star army. Wait, Mr. Su, wait for me to finish. You just said that these troops are not rushing to the beginning city to be enemies with the 5-star army. They are responsible for defending the city after taking it down. If that's the case, what do you think about this? I'll transfer 2,000 people from the division to you. Then you'll recruit 3,000 able-bodied men from the city as soldiers. In this way, won't you make up 5,000 people? The advantage of doing this is that it won't affect the combat ability of our new Second Army. It can also help you complete the mission. Isn't it the best of both worlds? Besides, it's just a mission to defend the city. It's not difficult. Even if they haven't undergone any training, they can still do it well. What do you think?" Kang Ji came up with a way to get the best of both worlds. He needed to ensure the combatability of a division. The organization could be incomplete, but they could be pulled and fought when there was a mission. Therefore, he had no choice but to come up with this plan. Originally, Su Yuan wanted to say something. However, when he heard this method, his attitude became a little hesitant. Since he did not reject it, immediately there was a way. Kang Ji added fuel to the fire and said, "Mr. Su, why does Bai Ming value us so much? Isn't it because our army has a certain level of combatability? If we don't have this characteristic, who will still value us? By that time, it'll be time to get rid of the donkey after it has outlived its usefulness. If that's the case, we won't have a good ending. I'm sure Mr. Su won't have a good time either. Factions are the most important thing in the army. A good man has 3 factions." Kang Ji said these words from Su Yuan's perspective. This made Su Yuan, who was originally hesitant, finally make up his mind. "Not bad. Mr. Kang, you're indeed a talented general with both wisdom and courage. You're right. How about this? I'll go talk to Mr. Rong Xiao now. Oh, by the way, about the 2,000 people that the 1st Cavalry Division will send out, please make early preparations." Sure. I'll make the arrangements now." Kang Ji thought about how some people in the division were dissatisfied with him. Some of them were simply spreading rumors. He didn't know how to deal with these people. Now that there was an opportunity, it would be good to get rid of them so that he could better control the troops. Su Yuan left in a hurry. He did not know how he told Rong Xiao, but the matter was settled. Then, the recruitment of soldiers in the 2 cities began. They were not working for the 5-star army, which was for the people. The people were not very enthusiastic about joining the army. In the end, there was no other way. The recruitment became a recruitment of able-bodied men. Who asked Shi Hung to be so anxious? Rong Xiao, who wanted to show off, had to do things well. Not only that, he also decided to personally send 40,000 troops to Beginning City to curry favor with Shi Hung. Under Beginning City, the siege was still ongoing. Since the military order was made in front of Shi Hung and Fangdingshan, under the command of Tsingguang, the attacks became fiercer and fiercer. Several times, their soldiers rushed up the city tower. Although they were eventually suppressed, at least they saw the dawn of victory. The siege was very lively. The Wara war camp under the city was unusually quiet. This kind of siege warfare was not suitable for cavalry. They had been under the city for a long time, and some of the cavalry were even lazy. But all of this changed with the return of a few Walla cavalry. They were the Walla warriors who followed General He to the battle. They were lucky enough to escape. Naturally, they had to return to the camp and report everything they saw and experienced to their leader. In fact, they were not the only ones who returned. Not far from the camp, there were hundreds of cavalry waiting there. Everyone heard Shi Wanshan shout and knew that Bai Ming had joined forces with the 5-star army. They were worried that once they returned, they would alert the enemy, so they sent a few representatives back to the camp. In the leader's tent, Yes Hen received these deserters. After learning that He died in battle and only a few hundred of the cavalry escaped, he was so angry that he flipped the desk in front of him and said angrily, "You said that the reason why we lost was because the Bai Ming army stabbed us in the back, right?" "Yes, leader. We saw it with our own eyes and experienced it personally. Otherwise, with our fast horses, no matter how many enemies there are, they can't stop us." Several soldiers who escaped knelt on the ground and kowtowed. Good. What a good Bai Ming army. I trusted them so much, but they dared to play tricks behind our backs. I'm going to find Shi Hung and ask him for an explanation. Yes Hen could not suppress his anger and was about to leave the tent. "You can't." A figure blocked his way, and then that person knelt on the ground. "Leader, you can't do that. Bai Ming and the 5-star army have joined forces. If we go to them now, not only will it not have the slightest effect, but it will also alert them. If we don't do it well, they will do harm to our leader." The person who spoke was the deputy general that Yes Hen had just promoted, Chao Lu. In Mongolian, it meant stone. Chapter 1177. This person was very burly and had good skills. More importantly, he was not only a boorish man, but he also had his own ideas when he encountered problems. Ever since he was discovered by Yes Hen, he was promoted to be a deputy general by his side, in charge of his own safety. Sometimes he would even lead troops to become a general. When Chao Lu blocked the way, Yes Hen wanted to kick him away out of anger. However, when he heard that the Ming army would be a threat to his safety, he quickly calmed down. Whether it was the battle with Tuatabuhua or the battle with the 5-star army, although he had failed many times, he still lived until now because of his carefulness. For such a person, if you asked him to take risks, he would never do such a stupid thing. Since he could not meet Shiheng, there were some things that he could not figure out what was going on. He could not help but feel a little unwilling. He suppressed his anger and asked Chao Lu, "Let me ask you, do you think the Ming army and the 5-star army have really joined forces?" I don't know, but I don't think so. If that's the case, why are they attacking the beginning city so fiercely? Moreover, they did not ask for our help from the beginning to the end. This makes no sense. Chao Lu shook his head. That's right, that's what I think as well. If the Ming army and the 5-star army have really joined forces, what they should do is to besiege us instead of acting for us. Besides, their deaths and injuries are real. I don't believe that they will betray us. Yes Hen nodded and agreed with Chao Lu's words. Although he was puzzled when he turned around and saw the few cavalry warriors kneeling on the ground, he became suspicious again. He knew these people, and 2 of them were Helay's bodyguards. They would never lie to him. Then, who was telling the truth? To be able to become the leader of the Wara, Yes Hen was indeed smart. He quickly thought of a way. He said to Chao Lu beside him, Go to Shiheng's tent. Don't tell him anything else. Just tell him that I have caught a cold and am sick. Ask him to come and see me." When he heard that he was going to Shiheng's tent, Chao Lu's heart skipped a beat. He thought that the leader wanted him to question the other party. However, when he heard that it was just a message, he immediately felt relieved. "Leader, you mean to bring Shiheng to our camp and then you can question him yourself? Not bad." He nodded his head in satisfaction. He was happy for Chao Lu's intelligence. At the same time, he said, "I want to ask him myself. What's going on? If this is really a trap set by the 5-star army, then he needs to give me an explanation and give me enough compensation. 100,000 elite cavalrymen. Just thinking about it makes my heart ache." After years of constant battles, Yeshin's strength had been greatly reduced. Now he only had 50,000 cavalrymen with him and 80,000 cavalrymen in the Hanoi headquarters. In total, he only had 130,000 cavalrymen left. This time, he had lost nearly half of his forces. Anyone would be heartbroken. After knowing Yeshin's intention, Chao Lu knew what to do. He agreed and left the tent. In view of the fact that the provisions were almost burned, Shiheng increased the surveillance of the Walla army camp. When a few cavalrymen suddenly entered the Walla army camp, he became alert. Although he didn't know where these cavalrymen came from or what they wanted to do, he instinctively became vigilant. At this moment, Chao Lu came. Using Yeshin's illness as an excuse, he asked Shiheng to go to the Walla army to discuss the next step of the battle plan. "Oh, Leader Yes Hen is sick. Is there anything wrong?" "Sigh, how could such a strong body get sick just like that? How about this? I'll immediately send people to bring a skilled doctor. As for Marquis, he's really busy with military affairs, so he won't go." Just like how Yes Hen didn't dare to come to his tent, Shiheng was also afraid of death. Who knows if he's really sick, or if he's just trying to trick me to go over and harm me. Not only did Shiheng not go, but he also wanted to send a doctor with him. Chao Lu, who was afraid of being exposed, of course didn't agree. He could only say that the leader's illness wasn't serious. The Walla army also had their own doctors, so they didn't need to trouble Shi Hung. As for the discussion of the battle plan, they would wait until their leader recovered. Chao Lu came in a hurry and left in a hurry. Looking at his back, Shi Hung coldly snorted. This is clearly a trick to trick me into going to your camp. It seems like there really is something wrong with the Wara army. Someone go invite General Fong over for the discussion. Not to mention that Shi Hung was already on guard. When Chao Lu returned to the camp and told him what happened, Yeshin's expression changed again and again. So, Shi Hung is guilty and doesn't dare to appear? Yes, leader, that's the feeling I get. It seems like there really is something wrong with the Bai Ming army. Chao Lu expressed his feelings. But why would they do this? Don't they know that compared to us, the 5-star army is their biggest enemy? If we let it continue, sooner or later, Bai Ming will regret it. Yes Hen didn't understand and sighed. Then he shook his head and said, forget it. Since we're not on the same side, there's no point in staying here. Let's just leave. Knowing that there was danger, Yes Hen wouldn't stay here and be a live target. Leaving was what he thought he should do. But he didn't expect that Chao Lu would stop him. Leader, this matter can't be rushed. We just went to find Shi Hung during the day. If we prepare to retreat now, they'll definitely notice. I don't think the Bai Ming army has any intention of targeting us right now. Why don't we wait and see? We'll leave when they relax. This way we'll be safer. Knowing that Hu Lu was right, Yes Hen nodded in agreement. That's good too. In order to confuse them, we'll tell them that I'm sick and won't be around for 2 days. But you have to find those generals in private and tell them to prepare to retreat at any time. As long as we can leave here safely, something should be thrown away. After sighing, Yes Hen came to the bed in the tent and laid down. He was really going to pretend to be sick. In the Bai Ming army's main tent, Shi Hung found Fong Dingshan and told him about Hu Lu's intentions. Then he asked for his opinion. General Fong, in your opinion, does Yes Hen want to harm Marquis? Fong Dingshan didn't respect Shi Hung from the bottom of his heart. Especially after working together for a while, he found that this person was very afraid of death after he got a high position. His ability was only above average, and he was even worse than Fong Dingshan in some aspects. Fong Dingshan only had his current position because of his good luck and seniority. If Shi Hung died in battle, then the position of commander would fall on Fong Dingshan's head. Therefore, Fong Dingshan really hoped that something would happen to Shi Hung. It would be best if he was killed. Of course, he wouldn't show any of this. When he saw Shi Hung's fear of death, Fong Dingshan despised him in his heart, but he said with a nonchalant expression, that shouldn't be the case. The Walla army only has 50,000 cavalry. If they really hurt you, they won't be a match for our Bai Ming army. Is Commander overthinking it? After Fong Dingshan's explanation, Shi Hung's worries were mostly gone. Thinking about it, if they really wanted to harm the Bai Ming army, the Walla army would have acted before the 100,000 cavalry left and not now. Now that there was no news of the 100,000 cavalry leaving, it was indeed not the time to act. He shook his head and said, it seems like Marquis is overthinking it. Commander, you must be overthinking it. Fong Dingshan chuckled. At this moment, a soldier outside the tent asked to see him. The moment he entered the tent, he confirmed that he was indeed sick. Now, the news had spread throughout the entire Walla cavalry camp. Under normal circumstances, when a general was on the battlefield, even if he was sick, he wouldn't tell anyone. This could easily affect the morale of the army. Therefore, Shi Hung never thought that Yes Hen would pretend to be sick. Okay, you can leave. After telling the soldier to leave, Shi Hung chuckled. It seems like Marquis is overthinking it. Forget it. Let's not talk about this anymore. Marquis just got the news that the 100,000 soldiers from the 4 nearby cities are about to arrive. At that time, it will be time for us to attack the beginning city. General Fong, our chance to make a great contribution is coming. Haha, then I shall congratulate you in advance, Commander. Fong Dingshan cupped his hands together. Then there was a burst of laughter in the tent. 50 miles away from the northeast of the beginning city, an army that stretched far away was gathering here. They were the troops of Bugnam of Gojoseon, Yang Chindong, who had rushed here from the direction of the Wulubone River. In fact, they had been here for more than a day. Considering that the other troops had not yet arrived at the designated location, Yang Chindong ordered the army to stop and rest. Everyone was exhausted from the rapid march. Next was the counterattack, and their physical strength must keep up. Tell the soldiers to eat some dry food, rest more, and don't light a fire. Yang Chindong instructed the captain of the Long Way, 1st Brigade, Chiu Vi. Chiu Vi took the order and left. Yang Chindong looked at Beta Persei, who was standing beside him, and asked, "Where is the Far Eastern Army?" "Young master, I just received their telegram. They will arrive at the designated location by tonight at the latest. Then they will wait for the young master's order, and the counterattack will begin." Beta Persei said excitedly. They had been rushing all the way, and finally they were going to fight. Of course, he was happy because he loved fighting. "How many people do they have now?" Yang Chindong asked again. "Young master, almost all of the Liaodong armies, 40,000 people have arrived. There are also nearly 20,000 people from the Mabe division, and about 40,000 Mongolian cavalry. In addition, there are 70,000 Walla cavalry prisoners who are being guarded by General Shirwanshan and nearly 70,000 soldiers." Beta Persei replied respectfully. Chapter 1178. Okay. Yang Chindong's eyes showed confidence when he heard that there were 100,000 cavalry to help. "Tell Wang Shan to inform Tiger's Man that we will launch a full-scale counterattack tomorrow morning. We will make the enemy pay the price and let them remember this painful lesson." "Yes," Beta Persei agreed and turned to leave when he heard that the battle was tomorrow. "Wait, send a telegram to Feng Liang and tell him to inform Sha Bei to regain control of Shajing and Jingzhou City and cut off the retreat of the Walla cavalry." Yang Chindong thought that if it were not for the participation of Yeshin's troops, the Baiming army would not have been able to attack New City for such a long time without any worries. He was determined to hit them hard and even had the idea of taking down Yeshen. The telegrams were sent out one by one. Chan Bo, the commander of the Far Eastern Army, who received the telegram, issued an order to inform the troops to have a good rest tonight and start the counterattack tomorrow morning. The telegram was sent to Tiger's Man in Jingzhou City, which made him excitedly slap the desk. A good desk was ruined just like that. "Great. Immediately inform Lord Yu, Division Commander Yangxi, and other division commanders to come to the military headquarters for a meeting." Hu Mang laughed heartily. After waiting for more than a year, news of the counterattack had finally arrived. It was time for him to vent his frustrations. Shajing City. Director Feng Liang, who had been hiding in the basement, almost shouted out in excitement when he received the telegram from Yang Chindong. After suppressing the excitement in his heart, he gently knocked on the wall door leading to the ground room. After a while, Sha Bei walked in. Since Rong Shao left with 40,000 soldiers, most of the people who were monitoring him before also left, leaving only 2 people on the big tree outside the courtyard. They were only responsible for watching Sha Bei and not letting him leave the hospital. As for the situation in the courtyard, they didn't even want to look at it. A drunkard was not worthy of their attention. As soon as he entered the basement, he saw Feng Liang's excited look. Sha Bei was also happy, but he still asked tentatively and expectantly, "Director Feng, is there any good news?" "You're right, the 6th young master called. Take a look at it yourself," Feng Liang said and handed the telegram to Sha Bei. Then he saw the dignified man, who had silently swallowed all the grievances he had suffered, burst into tears. Good. The 6th young master still believes in me. He has also given me an important task. This is the time for us to shed our shame. These days, Sha Bei's mental pressure was great. He had no choice but to surrender, and there was even an element of faking it. But how many people could understand him? Could the sixth young master really understand him? At least if it were him, if his subordinates publicly announced their surrender to Ming, he would not believe them no matter what. Putting himself in Ming's shoes, did Yang Qindong really trust him that much? This had become the biggest question in his heart all this time. Even though Feng Liang appeared in front of him, he was still very happy. However, this did not mean that the sixth young master really believed him. What if the sixth young master came to calm him down? Before he got the final answer, he could imagine how worried Sha Bei was. Now that he saw this telegram, he could finally be relieved. If Yang Qindong did not really trust him, how could he tell him the war plan in advance? When he thought about how the sixth young master still believed in him despite what he had done, Sha Bei felt like a gentleman would die for his bosom friend. What was not worth risking his life for? After he calmed down and walked out of the basement, Sha Bei's spirit changed at this moment. Steward, do two things. First, bring people to kill that annoying fellow on the tree outside the courtyard. Second, inform Kong Ji and the other two teachers to come to my place for a meeting. The aura of a superior reappeared on Shibi's body, and his words were clear and forceful. The steward, who was originally a little stooped, suddenly straightened his body at this moment. He asked as if he did not know his master, "Master, killing people this, don't be afraid. The weather will change soon. Some bed bugs should be dealt with very early," Sha Bei said with an imposing manner. Shajing City was nearly 1,000 miles away from the first city. It was unknown how long it would take for the news of the counterattack to arrive. He could prepare in advance here and did not have to worry about the news being leaked. Seeing that Sha Bei was so confident, the steward, who had been holding his breath for a long time, immediately said, "Yes, master. Don't worry. I'll arrange it now." They were just two soldiers in charge of the surveillance mission. When they were still leaning against the tree trunk to rest, two arrows suddenly pierced into their bodies. The speed and ferocity of the arrows was so fast that they didn't even have the strength to scream before they were sent to meet the King of Hell. After an hour, Kong Ji and the other two division commanders rushed to the new Second Army's military headquarters and saw Sha Bei, who had changed into a brand new general's military uniform. "You're here. Take a look. Wearing the 5-star Army's military uniform is still the best." Sha Bei laughed and turned around. "Military commander, you're?" Kong Ji asked in confusion, but he already had a vague feeling in his heart. "Come, it's time to tell you the sixth young master's plan. Division commanders, listen up," Sha Bei said in a powerful voice. The 3 division commanders stood up straight because of this. The long-lost feeling returned to their bodies. Su Mansion. Su Yuan was eating dinner. Compared to normal people who only ate 1 dish, or at most 3 or 4 dishes, he had more than a dozen dishes in front of him. Not only that, but there were also 2 beautiful women by his side. Ever since he submitted to Ming, Su Yuan's life had fallen into debauchery. No one came to control him, and no one dared to control him. This made him more and more lawless and unruly. Especially after Rong Shao left, the entire city was completely under his control. He had even less scruples. Even when he ate, he was very ostentatious. He did not even need to use his hands. Instead, he needed someone to feed him, and it had to be a beautiful woman who fed him. While he was enjoying everything, he did not know that his brothers from the 1st Cavalry Division, led by Kong Ji, had surrounded the courtyard. His military power had already fallen. Those old brothers he trusted were either poisoned to death at home by the concubines of the CIA agents, or ambushed and killed or captured by Kong Ji and the others on their way home or to the barracks. As for the infantry division, although there were 2 or 3 old brothers who escaped the net because of their lack of strength, Sha Bei personally led the army into the barracks and dismembered them. Su Yuan was a selfish person. Ever since he took control of the military and took over Sha Bei, even if there were benefits, he would only share them with those old brothers. As for the ordinary soldiers under him, he did not care at all. The soldiers who were used to receiving high salaries from the 5-star army suddenly lost their source of income. Even if there was, it was pitifully little, which one of them did not feel angry in their hearts. So when they saw Shah Bey wearing a general's uniform and leading troops into the barracks, not only did they not resist, but most of them even helped him to capture those who wanted to resist. The military incident ended with loud thunder and small raindrops. From the beginning to the end, there was no movement at all. Su Yuan, who had been enjoying himself in the mansion, did not notice at all, until the housekeeper rushed into the dining room in a panic. Su Yuan was still lying in the arms of the beautiful woman and saying some dirty words. Old master, something bad has happened." After the housekeeper rushed in, his legs went soft and he knelt on the ground. "What's going on?" Su Yuan frowned slightly. He was very angry at the housekeeper's performance, and he was even angrier that such a good atmosphere was disturbed. Su Yuan still had an indifferent expression, but in the eyes of the housekeeper, he was angry that he did not fight back. However, he still knelt on the ground and trembled as he said, "Old master, outside our mansion, there are a lot of soldiers. They have surrounded us." "Oh, what?" Su Yuan, who suddenly realized what was going on, was also shocked. Then he stood up from the beauty's arms and asked loudly, "We're surrounded. What the hell is going on? Which part are they from?" "Old master, you should go out and see for yourself." The housekeeper really did not know how to explain or how to answer, but he believed that facts spoke louder than words. Looking at the steward's appearance, Su Yuan had a bad feeling in his heart. However, the habit of being in a position of power made him not lose his head out of fear. Instead, he shouted towards the outside of the hall, "Men, bring me my weapons and armor." Su Yuan, who had put on his armor and picked up his weapons, opened the door with more than 40 bodyguards in the mansion. "Who dares to surround this general's mansion? Do you want to die?" As soon as the door opened, a loud roar was heard. This was the preemptive strike. Su Yuan wanted to use this method to intimidate the people who came. As long as the other party was scared, he could take the opportunity to leave here and go to the military camp to mobilize soldiers. At that time, whoever came to find trouble with him would die a horrible death. However, the result was destined to disappoint him. Not only did his roar not intimidate the people around him, but a loud laugh was heard instead. The person said, "Mr. Su, you are so arrogant. Looks like you really have the prestige of an official after becoming a Biming official. You dare to kill anyone." The voice was so familiar. Su Yuan looked towards the source of the voice and saw his former colleague, the commander of the 1st Cavalry Division, Kong Ji, riding on a horse and looking at him with a smile on his face. What was even more eye-catching was that the other party was wearing the green uniform of the 5-star army and the white cape of the division commander. He looked majestic and heroic. The person who came was actually Kong Ji. Su Yuan knew that it was impossible to use his status to intimidate others. His expression changed from anger to a smile and said, "I was wondering who it was. So it's Mr. Kong. But what is the meaning of this? Why did you bring so many people to my mansion? Is there a military operation? Why didn't I know about it?" Chapter 1179. He was just pretending to be confused. The other party had already surrounded his residence. It was obvious that they were coming with a strong momentum, not to mention that they were wearing the military uniform of the 5-star army. However, Su Yuan deliberately ignored this. He didn't mention it because he wanted to stall for time. He believed that the news of his mansion being surrounded must have spread. Perhaps if he held on for a little longer, his old brothers would come and rescue him. Seeing that Su Yuan was still talking nonsense, Kong Ji shook his head. This person was a little smart, but only a little smart. He didn't have a long-term vision. He was destined to not achieve anything big. "Sigh, Mr. Su, you don't have to pretend anymore. You should be able to see why I'm here. I think it's better for you to surrender so that you won't lose face in front of so many people." Kang Ji pointed out the truth. This was the same as poking through the last layer of window paper. It was somewhat out of Su Yuan's expectations. He couldn't help but be surprised, hearing Kang Ji's confident tone. Could it be that he had already taken over the entire Shajing city? If that was the case, then he was really in danger. But how could he do it? Not only was there his infantry division here, there were also the 1st Cavalry Division, the 2nd Cavalry Division, the 3rd Cavalry Division, and other troops. How could he, a small commander of the 1st Cavalry Division, convince them all? Unless Commander Yi Bei stood up personally. When he thought about Yi Bei, shouldn't he be drinking in his mansion now? Right? Why didn't the 2 people who usually kept an eye on the new 2nd Army report today? They should have sent a message before dinner. What was going on? Were they scared by the appearance of Kang Ji and the others? Even at this time, Su Yuan still didn't think that Yi Bei would stand up one day. After all, he was the one who wrote the public surrender letter. In order to please Bai Ming, he even killed his guard captain, Wu Xiaoyi. Such a person was basically useless. In a short period of time, it could be said that a myriad of thoughts ran through his mind. The final result was that they could still fight. Kang Ji first looked at the soldiers surrounding his mansion and found that most of them were still wearing the uniforms of the Bai Ming army. He immediately felt confident and stopped talking to Kang Ji. Instead, he said to the soldiers, "Brothers, Kang Ji has lost his mind and wants to deal with me. I am Bai Ming's personal lord of Shajing City. You want to deal with me because you want to fall out with Bai Ming. But have you thought about the consequences? You'll be beheaded and your family will be implicated." Needless to say, Su Yuan's shout did cause a certain amount of disturbance in the army. Even now, there were still many soldiers who didn't understand what was going on. It was only out of habit that they followed their commanding officer to carry out the mission. Just now, outside the mansion, when they saw that Su Yuan's mansion was surrounded, some people were confused. Now that these words were said, many people's faces changed dramatically. Some even looked at the leader, Kang Ji, with a somewhat different gaze. This change fell into Su Yuan's eyes and naturally made him very happy. He immediately added fuel to the fire and said, "This is clearly Kang Ji wanting to offend his superiors. This is all his own idea. Brothers, don't be confused and make mistakes with him. How about this? I will only catch the ringleader and don't care about the accomplices. If anyone is willing to follow me, it will be a meritorious performance. Later, not only will I not hold him accountable, but I will also reward him." The soldiers who were originally at a loss and muttering in their hearts became more hesitant after hearing Su Yuan's shout. Some people were even considering whether to stand by Su Yuan's side. Kang Ji didn't expect that at this time, Su Yuan could still make such a counterattack. He couldn't help but be amused for a moment and said, "What? Is this the final battle of a trapped beast? Do you really think that I didn't prepare it all before coming here? Humph, if you want to die, then this division commander will fulfill your wish. Come, invite the commander." Just a moment ago, Si Bei had already arrived, but he didn't stand out. Instead, he stood outside the team. Kang Ji had already seen this. He thought of what Commander Si Bei said in the previous meeting. He said that he didn't want to face the traitor Su Yuan, so he didn't have the intention to invite the commander. But now, the morale of the army was obviously shaken. If the commander didn't come out, then it was very likely that there would be a problem. The moment Si Bei called for the commander, the crowd in the team panicked. Just as many people looked around, Si Bei appeared. He was wearing the 5-star Army's uniform, especially the shining golden beads on his shoulder. Even though the sky was about to turn dark, they were still very dazzling. Si Bei finally appeared. When Kang Ji called for the commander, Su Yuan felt that something was wrong. This seemed to be completely out of his control and even imagination. And when he saw the Sure Sui appear, this feeling became reality, making him feel as if he had been struck by lightning. A commander was a commander after all. His prestige wasn't something that Division Commander Kang Ji could compare with. In particular, there were all kinds of people. Due to the lack of time, there were people from all divisions. Kang Ji was only a division commander of the 1st Cavalry Division. It was obviously difficult for him to completely control them. But when it came to Si Bei, this wasn't a problem. As a commander, which soldier wasn't his former soldier? Si Bei's appearance caused the noisy discussions from before to immediately disappear. The situation was immediately reversed, and Su Yuan was pressured to the point that he couldn't breathe. After being stunned for a few breaths, Su Yuan's expression turned from black to white and then back to black. When he saw Si Bei appear, still wearing the 5-Star Army's uniform, he knew that things were going in the worst direction. But he still wouldn't give up without a fight. He was very clear what kind of role he had played before and how many things he had done wrong to the 5-Star Army. In the new 2nd Army, anyone could surrender, but he couldn't, based on what he had done. Even if Si Bei didn't kill him, he wouldn't be able to answer to Bugnam of Gojoseon. He didn't have any friendship with Yang Qindong. He didn't believe that Yang Qindong would spare him, a two-faced person. If he didn't want to give up without a fight, then he could only fight back. Even if Si Bei personally appeared, Su Yuan still pretended to be unafraid and shouted, "Commander Si Bei, aren't you sleeping every day? What are you doing here? Oh, I know. You must have been threatened by someone, right? The person who threatened you is Kang Ji, right? Don't worry, with me here, no one can hurt you. As long as you stand on my side, I can guarantee your safety." Originally, because of Si Bei's appearance, all the soldiers started to take sides. But with Su Yuan's shout, some of the weak-willed soldiers became confused. Could it be that Kang Ji really threatened the commander and that Kang Ji wanted to rebel? The changes in the soldiers below didn't escape Si Bei's eyes. He couldn't help but sigh and said, "Enough, Su Yuan. I didn't expect you to have such ability. You can turn black into white and say it so righteously. I'm afraid that people who don't know you will really believe your words. But what's true is true. How can it change because of a few words from you? Surrender. I will plead with Bugnam of Gojoseon to save your life." After saying this to Su Yuan, Si Bei didn't have any intention of stopping. Instead, he said to the surrounding soldiers, Si Bei was forced by the situation and for the survival of the new 2nd Army. I had no choice but to bow to Bai Ming. But this doesn't really mean that I want to surrender to Bai Ming. It's just a temporary measure. And all of this has also received the support of Bugnam of Gojoseon. Now, Bugnam of Gojoseon has sent news that he has brought his army to the grasslands. Now he is besieging the Bai Ming army and the Walla army. It won't be long before he brings his army to our Shajing city. In order to welcome Bugnam of Gojoseon, what we need to do now is to take back the city and do everything we should do. Moreover, Bugnam of Gojoseon also said that he understands the decision that everyone made under that situation. So, he won't make things difficult for any of us. Please don't worry about this. When the soldiers heard Si Bei's speech, they all revealed a joyful expression. A person's reputation was like the shadow of a tree. Just the 3 words Bugnam of Gojoseon represented a magnificent army. It was an invincible aura and influence. It seemed that as long as Yang Qindong was there to fight, no matter how difficult the problem was, it would be easily solved. Long live Bugnam of Gojoseon! Long live Bugnam of Gojoseon! No one knew who took the lead to shout, but at that moment many people shouted loudly. Even the few bodyguards behind Su Yuan hesitated for a moment before they put down their weapons and shouted loudly. To others, the thunder-like shouts were shocking, but to Su Yuan, it was no less than a death sentence. He knew that the overall situation was set, and he could not turn the situation around. Thus, he fell into a state of madness. He suddenly pointed at Si Bei and said, You are a villain, a fickle villain." "Villain, you are talking about yourself, right? The 5-Star Army has treated you well, and Bugnam of Gojoseon has treated you even better. You actually secretly contacted Bai Ming and thought of betrayal. People like you are the one who is shameful. This time, Without Si Bei saying anything, Kang Ji had already started to scold. Unlike Su Yuan, who got his position as a division commander with Si Bei's help, Kang Ji's position as a division commander was personally appointed by Yang Qindong. Moreover, Kang Ji was a Han Chinese. He had once served in the 5-star army and performed well. Although he was not Yang Qindong's student in terms of loyalty, he was much stronger than a foreigner like Su Yuan. Su Yuan, who had already gone crazy, did not pay attention to Kang Ji. Instead, he looked at Si Bei and said, "Tell me, did you never trust me? You are lying to me, right?" Chapter 1180. She shook her head. If she didn't trust Su Yuan, she wouldn't have taken the initiative to ask Yang Qindong for the position of infantry division commander. It could be said that her one-sided kindness had harmed the other party. But now there was no need to explain this. She didn't say anything, which made Su Yuan burst into laughter. I knew it. Ha ha ha, you never trusted me. You're a despicable person. For your big plan, you don't care about anyone's life. Even your guard captain, Wu Xiaoyi, you killed him without hesitation. A person like you is inhumane. Whoever follows, you will be betrayed by you sooner or later. Bullshit. Kang Ji was still the one who shouted. The matter of guard captain Wu was originally discussed with the military commander. He also volunteered. If he didn't do that, how could you rest assured that the military commander had really surrendered? He used his own life to ensure that our entire new Second Army didn't scatter and fall into chaos. He is the biggest hero. Kang Ji's eyes turned red when he talked about Wu Xiaoyi's matter. Wu Xiaoyi's death was his own request. At that time, Kang Ji and Bei both shed tears after hearing it. Now, it seemed that everything was worth it. If it wasn't for this, even if Bei wasn't harmed by Ming, she would have been forced to go somewhere else. In this way, it would be very difficult for the new Second Army to unite and form a joint force. The sacrifice of one person in exchange for the integrity of an army was worth it no matter how one looked at it. And the person who sacrificed himself was naturally a great hero. Su Yuan, who just found out the truth, widened his eyes in disbelief. He thought that Wu Xiaoyi's matter was an exception and that Bei had no choice but to deal with it. He didn't expect that everything was premeditated. Thinking about it, it wasn't wrong. It was precisely because of Wu Xiaoyi's death that he and Rong Xiao lost their vigilance against Bei. The idea of transferring Bei away from here also stopped at that moment. He had never thought that all of this had been discussed beforehand. Thinking about how he had already fallen into someone else's trap from then on, and how it was normal for him to end up like this, he had nothing to say about his defeat. Su Yuan, who knew the truth, seemed to have aged a lot in that instant. In the eyes of the others, it was more or less unbearable. After all, this was his old brother. Sai, you should decide on your own. You should know that once you fall into the hands of others, it will be difficult for you to even die. Originally, Bei wanted to plead with Yang Qindong, but looking at this person's recent actions, it was simply unforgivable. Instead of waiting to be captured and tortured, it was better to have a quick death. It could also be considered as leaving behind the last bit of dignity in life. As soon as he said that, Su Yuan's body, which was about to collapse, straightened up again. People said that a bad life was better than a good death. He didn't want to die, and with a plop, he knelt in front of Bei. Military commander, I don't want to die. We are old brothers who have gone through fire and water together for many years. Please spare my life for the sake of my hard work, even if I did make any contributions. Bugnam of Gojoseon admires you so much. As long as you are willing to plead for mercy, he will definitely spare me. As he spoke, he crawled on the ground and quickly came under Bei's mount. Su Yuan spoke with snot and tears. Looking at Su Yuan's appearance, Bei felt a trace of pity, but military discipline was a mountain, so he still turned his head to the side. If he really let Su Yuan go, how would he explain to the 6th young master, and how would he explain to the dead Wu Xiaoyi? After continuously crying a few times, there was no response from Shirbi. Su Yuan's eyes flashed with madness, and he suddenly shouted, "No! Why, we are old brothers who have gone through hard times together. You can be a military commander, but I can only be a division commander. You can obtain Bugnam of Gojoseon's trust, but I can't. I don't accept this. Shirbi, I will kill you. I want you to go to hell with me." As he shouted, Su Yuan pulled out his waist knife, raised it high, and chopped down at Shirbi. Puchi! A sharp, curved knife pierced through his body. Su Yuan's eyes widened as he watched the tip of the knife come out of his chest. He then looked back at Kang Ji, who was one step ahead of him, and the light in his eyes quickly dimmed. His head drooped and he died on the spot. This was the ugliest of human nature. When you made a mistake, you didn't know how to repent. Instead, you just blamed everything on others. When things were irreparable, you would plead for mercy. When your pleading failed, you would reveal your true nature. Unfortunately, Kang Ji had long been prepared for this move, and at the crucial moment, killed him first. Bury him. Shirbi sighed and said to the bodyguard beside him. Then, he didn't look at Su Yuan, who was killed. Instead, he said to Kang Ji, "Change the flag. Announce to all the people in the city that we have changed flags and have returned to the embrace of the 5-star army." This was how the superiors were. They couldn't be too soft-hearted. Otherwise, they wouldn't only hurt themselves, but also those who believed in them and followed them. After the order was given, Shajing and Jingzhou City were closed. The original Beiming dragon flag was also replaced with a bright 5-star red flag. Under the great wisdom of Shirbi and the others, the new Second Army was finally saved. At the same time, it also formed a response and sounded the horn for the destruction of the world of Wara. Shur City. A new day. The sun rose as usual. It was a sunny day and the weather was very good. There was no wind or rain, and the blue sky and green grass made people feel relaxed and happy. But this day was another dark day for the Beiming army and the Walla army. Just when most of the soldiers got up and were about to eat breakfast, a rumbling sound suddenly came from the ground. It was like spring thunder, completely breaking the tranquility of the grassland. After a series of rumbling sounds, a large number of troops appeared in the north and northwest of the barracks. They were like a sudden gust of wind, flying straight like a sharp arrow, approaching from afar. Enemy attack! Enemy attack! The scouts in charge of the security of the barracks shouted loudly, disrupting the normal order of the barracks. In the Beiming army's main tent, a scout rushed into the tent and fell to the ground. He said with his pale face, Marquis, the reinforcements of the 5-star army are here. The reinforcements are here. Shi Hung, who was eating breakfast with the help of the servants, froze when he heard this. Then his face darkened. Reinforcements? How many of them are here? Uncountable. There are so many of them. There's no end to them. The scout was so scared that he didn't know what to say. He could only tell the most direct impression. Bullshit. That's ridiculous. How can there be so many 5-star army here? Shi Hung reprimanded loudly. He waved his hand and dismissed the scout. Then he hurriedly said to the soldier beside him, "Pass down the order. The entire army is ready to fight. Take out my armor and weapons." After all, he was a veteran of the battlefield. He had participated in many life and death battles. He still had the basic composure. This scene didn't only happen in Shi Heng's tent, but also in other large tents. Just like in Xinguang's tent, Su Dei had already arrived. "General Tsin, the 5-star army is here. Let's prepare to retreat." "Retreat? Can't we fight?" Xinguang said with some dissatisfaction. Usually, Su Dei was quite brave. Back then, they were able to break through the outer city of Shur City by relying on his bravery. But now he became so cowardly. "Fight? How do we fight? Why don't you go out and take a look?" Su Dei shook his head bitterly. He was very clear about Xinguang's courage. However, if he could still say these words after seeing the lineup of the 5-star army, then he really had to admire him. Xinguang, who was a little suspicious, really walked out of the tent. When he saw the endless cavalry of the 5-star army not far away, he almost rolled down from the platform. He was already sweating profusely. He looked at Su Dei and said anxiously, "Retreat, retreat. Everyone retreat." "Roger." This was the answer Su Dei wanted. He didn't have the slightest intention to remind Xinguang that Shi Hung hadn't given the order to retreat. What he wanted was to create chaos without fighting. This would be more beneficial for the expansion of the Bugnam of Gojosian army. Xinguang ran away without any backbone. At this moment, Shi Hung was still arranging the defense at the front line. The 70,000 Liaodong cavalry were already eager to fight. Fang Dingshan rode on a tall horse with excitement in his eyes. He had long heard about how powerful the cavalry of the 5-star army was. Today he could finally see who was better. This had always been his dream. He wanted to defeat the 5-star army in front of so many people and tell the world that the Liaodong cavalry was the strongest. Rong Xiao also came and stood beside Shi Hung. At this moment, his eyes were filled with determination. This was his first time fighting a war. He had never experienced such a cruel scene before. He thought that fighting a war was just as exciting as storytelling. He didn't know the dangers and bloodshed in it. Rong Xiao's confidence came from the 100,000 soldiers behind him. In his heart, he was secretly happy that he could perform well in front of Admiral Shi Hung. In his opinion, his side had a few 100,000 cavalry and infantry. It was enough to fight against the reinforcements of the 5-star army. Perhaps it would be a great achievement, a great contribution. Compared to Rong Xiao's calmness, Shi Hung, who was riding on the horse, had a worried look on his face. He had a feeling that since the reinforcements of the 5-star army appeared so openly, they must have come prepared. Then what was their backup plan? Was it just a cavalry charge? Facing the Baiming army that was making all kinds of preparations, there would be no victory in this kind of charging formation. Was the 5-star army crazy? Why did they choose to fight like this? Just as Shi Hung was thinking about the reason for all of this. Where was the 5-star army's backup plan and how to fight this battle? A messenger appeared with a panicked expression. "Marquis, bad news, bad news." Chapter 1181. What's the matter? Why are you so panicky? How can you be so calm? Looking at the cowardly side of his subordinate, Shi Hung reprimanded him. He had already decided to punish this messenger after the big battle. Without paying attention to Shi Hung's displeasure, the messenger knelt on the ground and said with a trembling body, "Marquis, the Walla army has retreated. They didn't have the intention to greet us and rushed out of the barracks." And, hearing the news that the Walla army had retreated, Shi Hung's eyes narrowed for no reason, and he had a bad premonition. During this period of time, everyone had been on guard against each other, and they were no longer as sincere as they were at the beginning. However, even though he was mentally prepared, Shi Hung was still very angry when he heard that they had retreated without fighting. "Got it. You just said that there's more. What else?" "There's more. Deputy Chief Xinguang has escaped with 50,000 infantrymen under him." As if he had exhausted all his strength, the messenger mustered up the courage to finish speaking. "Ah, what?" Hearing this news, Shi Hung's expression changed drastically. He turned around abruptly, and the sword on his body was placed on the messenger's neck. With the cold sword on his neck, the messenger's face suddenly turned pale. However, since Shi Hung had asked this question, he had to answer it. He could only continue to speak. "Just now, Deputy Chief Xinguang has retreated with his troops. They withdrew all the troops that were attacking the city and fled to the south." "Yaya, Xinguang, you've ruined Marquis' plan." Hearing that Xinguang had also escaped, Shi Hung's expression changed drastically. Although Xinguang only had 50,000 soldiers in his hands, he was responsible for attacking the first city. Once they retreated, the 5-star army in the first city would no longer be in danger. At the same time, they might be behind him. If that was the case, how could he resist? Not to mention, after days of bitter battles, the 50,000 soldiers under Xinguang had experienced life and death situations. They could be described as elites. Once they left, not only would their combat power be greatly reduced, they would also not be able to find a replacement. Xinguang's escape added even more uncertainty to the battle. In a fit of anger, he swung his saber, and the messenger's head flew into the air. Shi Hung, who had killed someone, had red eyes, and even his arms were trembling. It was obvious that he was angry in his heart. Report. Marquis, the 4 gates of the first city have been opened. They've rushed out of the inner city and are heading toward our camp in the outer city. Another messenger rushed over on horseback. Before he arrived, his shout had already resounded in the air. If Xinguang was still around, they would have been able to more or less delay the 5-star army in the city from leaving the city, since they had already taken down the outer city. But now it was too late. Shi Heng's body shook slightly on the horse. Before the battle had even begun, the result had already been decided. Now that he was facing internal and external troubles, he knew that he had already lost. Shi Heng forced himself to stay alert. He looked at Rong Xiao, who was not far away, and said to the bodyguard beside him, "Ask General Rong to come over. Also, you go and inform General Fong to retreat immediately." Rong Xiao was still riding on his horse, feeling the tense atmosphere before the battle. For him, who was on the battlefield for the first time, this feeling was very exciting. It caused his adrenaline to rise uncontrollably. His face also turned a lot redder because of this. "General Rong, Marquis wants to see you." The bodyguard walked over and conveyed Shi Heng's military order. Okay, thank you for your trouble." Rong Xiao was very excited when he heard that Shi Heng wanted to see him. He, who had focused all his attention on the battlefield, did not know what had happened behind the scenes. If he knew, he would not be happy but scared to death. He came in front of Shi Heng with an excited face. He tried his best to appear calm in order to leave the best side of Shi Heng. "Not bad. It's General Rong's first time on the battlefield, yet you're so calm. You truly have the demeanor of a great general." Shi Heng, who was trying his best to raise his spirits, praised Rong Xiao. This time, whether they could successfully escape or not depended on this person. "Thank you, Marquis, for your praise. This is all because of your leadership." Rong Xiao did not dare to take the credit. "Very good. You are not anxious or impatient. Not bad. Since that is the case, I will leave the first battle to you. Can you complete it?" There was no time, and Shi Heng did not want to prepare any more groundwork. He went straight to the point. Hearing that he could be the vanguard, Rong Xiao was very excited. He patted his chest and said, "Marquis, please rest assured. Our swords and arrows want to drink blood. We want to have a taste." "Okay, I approve. You can go, as long as you make a great contribution. Marquis will definitely report it to the Emperor and ask for your reward." Seeing Rong Xiao so set off, Shi Heng's face finally showed a trace of satisfaction. "Thank you, Marquis." Rong Xiao cupped his fists and said gratefully. He then turned around and rode away. He did not know that once he left, he would never return. "Let's retreat." After looking at Rong Xiao's back, Shi Heng turned around and left. War was like this. It was either you die or I live. In order to survive, he could only sacrifice Rong Xiao and his 100,000 troops. On the other side, Shi Heng's order also reached the ears of Liaodong Iron Cavalry General Fang Dingshan. "You want us to retreat? What the hell?" Fang Dingshan, who had long been prepared to compete with the 5-star troop, was obviously unhappy. He looked at the messenger with a glint in his eyes, and a murderous aura exuded from his body. "General, this is Marquis order." The messenger, thought for a moment and was afraid that Fong Dingshan would vent his anger on him. Marquis had already killed one, and he did not want to be the second. Thinking of this, he carefully moved forward and said, "General, the Walla cavalry has already retreated." General Tsingguang also left with his troops. "When Marquis told me to inform you, he was also prepared to retreat. What do you think?" Fong Dingshan, who was about to vent his anger on the messenger soldier, involuntarily paused. After about 3 breaths, he let out a long sigh. "I see. Thank you for the information. General, you are too serious. Please hurry up." When the messenger heard Fong Dingshan's words of gratitude, he immediately let out a long sigh of relief. He then cupped his fists and left. After the messenger left, Fong Dingshan did not dare to delay any longer. He said to Luo Baikuin, "Pass down the order. All troops retreat. Retreat." Military orders were like mountains. Although Luo Baikuin still had a lot of questions, since it was the general's order, he had to carry it out. After he agreed, he ordered the 70,000 Liaodun cavalry to retreat in echelons. Elites were indeed elites. Even when they were retreating, they were still orderly. Compared to the army led by Shi Hung and Tsingguang, who were fleeing in panic, they were much better. The 5-star army had arrived. According to yesterday's agreement, they launched a general attack at 3 in the morning. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers outside the city and tens of thousands of soldiers inside the city launched an attack together. If Shi Hung could have predicted this, or if he could have remained calm in the face of danger, with his advantage in numbers and the cooperation with the Wara cavalry, he might not have lost the battle. On the contrary, as long as he persevered, victory was not impossible. After all, the provisions of the new army in the beginning city had been used up. Just this morning, Yang Si took out all the food he had stored and made a delicious meal for the soldiers. It was as if he was going to break the axe and sink the boat. If such an opponent could be suppressed, it would only take a long time for the morale to drop, and it would be time for a counterattack. Unfortunately, under a series of small actions and preparations, Bai Ming and Walla could not be of one mind, let alone fight the enemy together. When he learned that the 5-star army suddenly appeared in the east and north and began to attack, leader Yes Hen decisively gave the order to retreat. He could not guarantee that when the 5-star army arrived, the Bai Ming army could not be relied on. He would never put his hopes on the so-called allies, especially those who were not reliable. Yeshin's retreat was just a signal to retreat. Next was Tsingguang's 50,000 soldiers, Fong Dingshan's 70,000 Liaodun cavalry, and Shi Heng's 30,000 elite soldiers. An entire army of 200,000 retreated without a fight, leaving Rong Shao and the 100,000 infantrymen on the battlefield. From an advantage to a disadvantage, the originally fierce battle ended up like this. It seemed to be a coincidence, but if one thought about it carefully, it was inevitable. If the alliance was not united, it would be better not to unite. Otherwise, the consequences would be unimaginable. Having said that, Rong Shao, who was completely unaware of all this, was riding on his war horse in high spirits and watching his army get into formation to fight the enemy. As expected of a merchant, he knew how to maximize the benefits of everything. After receiving Shi Heng's order, he gathered the generals under his command and told them openly, "Let's go and see what's going on. I am a person who does not know much about war, nor do I know much about military matters. However, there is one thing that I know, and that is that it is natural for soldiers to eat grain. Therefore, what I want to do is to solve your worries. How about this? In this battle, no matter how the court rewards the generals who have made great contributions, I will reward them with 1,000 to 10,000 taels of silver. How about it? When there is a great reward, there will be brave men." Under the great reward, the generals were all excited. They all expressed that they would fight this battle well and add glory to Rong Shao's face. Laughing with satisfaction, Rong Shao watched the generals leave the tent. Humming an unknown tune, he called for the military singers and prostitutes. And just like that, they began to drink in the big tent. To Rong Shao, as long as everything was arranged to the right people, he only needed to wait for the good news in the big tent. While drinking wine and watching the music and dance, he even imagined the scene of going to Shiheng to report his victory. Presumably, this time, he would definitely achieve great success. First city. All the cavalry warriors of the new army had done all the preparation work before 3 o'clock in the morning. They filled their stomachs, fed their war horses, sharpened their swords and spears, and prepared their bows and arrows. As soon as the time was up, they would set off together and rush out of the city. They wanted to vent all the grievances that they had suffered during these days at this moment. Chapter 1182. As the commander of the army, Tiger's man wore an eye-catching purple cloak. It was the unique symbol of a first-rank officer. At this moment, he was also riding on a horse with a scimitar in his hand. He had given the order for the entire army to charge. According to the plan, the 5-star army outside the city would attack half an hour before the hour of the 5-star army. After all, the distance between the two sides was quite far, and it would take some time for them to rush over. The 5-star army inside the city would only need to wait for the hour of the 5-star army to pass before launching their attack. Just as the hour of the 5-star army passed by and Tiger's man was prepared to charge into the city, the scouts suddenly sent a message saying that the Ming army on the outer city gate was beginning to retreat. What's going on? How is this possible? Tiger's man said with a face of disbelief. The war hadn't officially begun yet. How could the Ming army retreat? Suspecting that this was a trap, Tiger's man personally led a group of generals to the inner city gate tower. As expected, they saw the Ming soldiers fleeing in panic. Through the binoculars, they could clearly see the Ming army soldiers on the outer city gate tower quickly rushing down the city. Some people even threw the Ming dragon flag in their hands to the ground in order to save time. There were also some soldiers who were pushing each other and cursing as they went down the city gate. Some of the more violent ones even attacked, but there were no deaths. This can't be fake, right? Deng Yu, the commander of the new First Army's 2nd Cavalry Division, who saw all of this through the binoculars, couldn't believe it. After all, chaos before the war had even begun. This didn't make sense, so it was normal to think more about it. Fake? If this is all an act by the Ming army for us to see, then I can only say that they shot themselves in the foot. What's so scary about an army without any morale? How could they be a match for our new First Army? Tiger's man put down the binoculars and said with a proud expression, "In a battle between two armies, the level of morale often determined the outcome of the battle. Unless it was a very elite army, otherwise it was absolutely impossible to stage such a scene because it was very likely that the morale of the army would really be really lax and out of control." That's right. It's very likely to be true. Although we don't know what's going on outside, we shouldn't miss such an opportunity. Commander, I suggest we launch the attack in advance. Lu Zhua, the commander of the 1st Cavalry Division, requested after putting down his binoculars. That's right. Our heavy cavalry regiment requests for battle. Regiment Commander Windchaser said, "Our light cavalry regiment is fast. We also request to fight." Commander Ma Xiangshan did not forget the last time they encountered the Liaodong Iron Cavalry that retreated without a fight, although there was a military order for him to retreat at that time. And although it seemed that the order was correct, it was still a humiliation to him and the light cavalry regiment. Even in his dreams, he wanted to take revenge. Our reconnaissance regiment also requests to fight. Regiment Commander Ding Shan also stood up. Okay. Seeing that it was about to become a mobilization meeting, Tiger's mane quickly waved his hand. Since everyone is so full of fighting spirit, then I don't think there's any need to prioritize. Let's go out in 4 cities. In short, we have to go all out and defeat the enemy. Yes, there was no need to fight. Everyone could go out of the city with the fastest speed to join the battle. The Tiger generals were all eager to try, and their faces were full of murderous intent. Next, the generals rushed down the city. Then, the 4 main city gates of the first city, which led to the outside world, were all opened. Then, the vast cavalry army rushed out and rushed to the barracks behind Rong Shao's army, which was not prepared. After receiving Rong Shao's promise of a heavy reward, the generals were full of fighting spirit. Because of this, they all wanted to make the first contribution. The generals who were supposed to be in charge of the security at the rear also moved their troops to the front. In this way, they could find an opportunity for themselves. It was precisely this kind of move that made their rear seem very empty. When the new cavalry army rushed out of the inner city, smoothly passed through the outer city, and arrived at the rear of the Ming army, they did not encounter any decent resistance at all. Although the division commanders and regimental commanders were also very curious as to why such a result occurred, they did not stop attacking. Instead, when they arrived at the rear of Rong Shao's army and saw that the enemy's rear was undefended, one by one, they pounced forward like wolves and tigers. They did not care why such a fatal loophole appeared in the Ming army. They only knew that if they did not take advantage of the situation, they would be bastards. Since the enemy was not prepared, they only needed to charge forward. They would definitely not greet the enemy first and give the enemy time to prepare for battle. As a result, the Ming army was in a tragic situation. Suddenly, tens of thousands of cavalrymen from the 5-star army appeared behind them. It was as if the heavens had descended from the sky. Several Ming army that had reached tens of thousands of soldiers were almost defeated after being stabbed in the butt. This kind of defeat quickly affected the other Ming army nearby. Some generals even did not know what to do with their troops. Should they prepare their bows and arrows to kill the 5-star army? Or should they turn around and deal with the 5-star army that had suddenly appeared behind them? Even the generals could not make a decision at the first moment. The soldiers below were even more chaotic. Many soldiers had fled before the battle. There were also many people who were smart enough to kneel on the spot and raise their weapons high. They were already prepared to surrender. 100,000 soldiers. Although it seemed like a lot, if they really fought, it would be difficult to kill them all even after a day and a night. However, when the thoughts of surrendering and fleeing took over, it was not that difficult to deal with. In less than an hour, the army began to collapse. When the 5-star army arrived in front of them, it did not take much effort for them to easily obtain victory. The 1st Cavalry Division was the most outstanding cavalry. Under the leadership of Division Commander Tian, they were the first batch of 5-star army cavalrymen to charge into the Ming army. The original 10,000 soldiers had now expanded to 20,000 under Yang Qindong's special permission. This was also their first battle after the expansion. Division Commander Tian, whose request for everyone was to perform well, especially the veterans. They had to set an example for the new recruits and let them know what it meant to be invincible and invincible. When the 20,000 cavalrymen rushed over excitedly, they saw that the Ming army was basically defenseless. The scene of kneeling and surrendering was so spectacular and so ironic. Even Division Commander Tian, who had experienced countless bitter battles, did not know how to describe what he was seeing at this moment. Division Commander, what is going on? 1st Cavalry Division Commander Taimu rode to Tian Hu's side and scratched his head with a confused expression. Not only Commander Taimu, but even Tian Hu himself did not know what was going on. However, he was still a division commander and had been placed in an important position by Yang Qindong. His ability to adapt was still very strong. After a short moment of hesitation, he said, "Let's not care about that. We will continue the pursuit as planned. As for these captives, let the people behind us deal with them." The 1st Cavalry Division was the strongest cavalry division. What they should be doing was searching for the strongest opponent that matched their status, not standing here and receiving captives. After Tian Hu gave the order, the 20,000 cavalrymen leaped over the captives and continued to charge forward as if they did not see them. Even when they passed by Rong Shao's camp, they did not have any intention of stopping. Following closely behind were the new army and the Liaodong cavalry division. They only stopped for a moment before making the same decision as the 1st Cavalry Division. They let go of the Baiming captives and continued to chase forward. Before they came, Yang Qindong had personally given the order that their opponents this time were the Walla cavalry and the 70,000 Liaodong cavalry of Baiming. As long as they dealt a heavy blow to them, the 5-star army would have no opponents on the grasslands in the future. This would be a great achievement. As for the Baiming captives, who did not even have the will to fight, who would care about them? 3 armies passed by one after another without the slightest pause. This frightened Rong Xiao, who was in the tent. A moment ago, he was still drinking wine and watching music. However, in the next moment, someone came to report that the army was in chaos. The 5-star army cavalry appeared from all directions, and several generals had already knelt down and begged the 5-star army to surrender. The wine that he had just drunk was spat out from his mouth. Rong Xiao sat there in a daze, as if he had been struck by lightning. It was not strange for him to have such an expression. If it was someone else, they would not be any better. It was just 100,000 Ming dynasty soldiers. Even if infantry were weaker than cavalry, they should not have been defeated in less than an hour. Moreover, didn't they also have cavalry? Whether it was the Walla cavalry or the 70,000 elite Liaodong cavalry, what did they do? Did they also lose? There were too many things that he could not understand. At this moment, Rong Xiao did not know that Shi Hung and the cavalry had already escaped. He was still sitting there like a fool, until the sound of tremors came from the tent, and someone came to report that the 5-star army cavalry was charging towards the tent. Rong Xiao was even more cowardly as he buried his head under the table. He did not even dare to raise his head. He did not have the demeanor of a commander of 100,000 soldiers. At this moment, Rong Xiao could only pray in his heart that no one would notice him. No one would discover him. Perhaps his prayers really worked. Surprisingly, those cavalry troops didn't enter his tent and just ran past him several hundred meters away. The outside quickly returned to silence, and no one came into the tent. Rong Xiao patted his chest and got up from the table. Then he saw that everyone in the tent was like him, trembling on the ground. If it was only the dancers who were behaving like this, it could still be forgiven. After all, they were women, not soldiers, so he couldn't be too strict with them. However, the bodyguards who were protecting him were also behaving like this, which really made Rong Xiao furious. He couldn't help but shout loudly, "What are you all doing? Ah!" Chapter 1183. This shout scared the bodyguards who were kneeling on the ground. None of them dared to raise their heads. Rumble. Rong Xiao, who was about to stand up and teach those bodyguards a lesson, once again hid under the table. His body trembled once again. Rong Xiao was about to stand up and teach those bodyguards a lesson. However, the same thing happened again. The cavalry passed by the camp again and did not disturb them. When everything quieted down, Rong Xiao lifted his head from the desk and saw that the bodyguards were still in the same position. He was furious. Just as he was about to scold them, the cavalryman came again, forcing him to bury his head in his chest again. This repeated 3 times. It was the 1st Cavalry Division, the new army, and the Liaodong Cavalry Reinforced Regiment that passed by. This scared Rong Xiao 3 times, but it also made him more courageous. Holding a sharp, long sword in his hand, he stood up. He wanted to kill 1 or 2 of the bodyguards. He wanted to remind the others that he was the master. When there was danger, they should protect him and not just care about their own lives. Another rumbling sound rang out. But to Rong Xiao, who had already experienced it 3 times, it no longer had any effect of intimidating him. However, just when he thought that the cavalry would pass by safely, the footsteps outside the tent were getting closer and closer. Then the curtain of the tent was opened from the outside. The commander of the 1st Cavalry Division, Lu Jua, walked in with a group of soldiers. They had also seen some tents here and had come to search them out of curiosity. As a new army that had guarded the city for several months and been trapped for more than a year, their combat strength had dropped a level due to the lack of nutrition. Yang Qindong took this into consideration and ordered them to stay and clean up the battlefield. It was the easiest job. The 1st Cavalry Division of the new army was in charge of capturing prisoners in this area. Originally, he thought that there would be no one in the tent since several cavalry units had passed by. However, he didn't expect to see more than 30 people when he entered the tent. One of them was even holding a sword and standing in the middle of the tent with an angry look on his face. "There is a tough guy here." Lu Zhuo sighed when he saw the person. As his voice fell, several bodyguards behind him rushed out and surrounded the person holding the sword. It seemed that if the other party dared to make a move, they would rush up and chop him into meat paste. The person holding the sword was Rong Shao. He wanted to teach those bodyguards a lesson and then force them to protect him and leave here. He did not expect that there would be cavalry who noticed this place and rushed in. When he saw those bodyguards surrounding him, he was scared and threw his sword on the ground. Then he knelt on the ground and shouted, "Sir, please spare me." He turned out to be a coward. This dramatic scene stunned Lu Zhuo. "Yes, I am a coward." In order to survive, Rong Shao, who was kneeling on the ground, forced himself to raise his head. He wanted to see who the other party was and whether they could be bribed. As long as they could let him live, he was willing to pay a lot of money. When he raised his head, he recognized Lu Zhuo. He immediately shouted, "Division Commander Lu, I am Rong Shao. You don't know me? I used to do business with the city, Lord's Mansion in the first city." If he did not shout like this, Lu Zhuo might not recognize him. If he was captured as an ordinary prisoner, he might have a chance to escape. But now his shout had completely exposed his identity. After Lu Zhuo heard the name Rong Shao, he frowned and asked, "Are you the Ming merchant Rong Shao?" Hearing Lu Zhuo call out his name and identity, Rong Shao quickly raised his head and said, "Yes, Division Commander Lu, I am Rong Shao. We have met before. I have even worked in the army." This time, Lu Zhuo looked carefully and recognized that the person in front of him was indeed Rong Shao. He could not help but laugh and said, "Oh, it's really you. Come, get up quickly." As he spoke, he walked over and made a gesture of supporting him with both hands. Receiving such treatment, Rong Shao's face was naturally filled with joy. He stood up with a smile on his face. But soon, this smile froze on his face because the next moment, a heavy punch hit his lower abdomen. With just one punch, he vomited all the food that he had just eaten. Rong Shao's name could be said to be well known in the beginning city. Unfortunately, it was not a good reputation, but a bad reputation. It was this person who became Ming's lackey. He first persuaded Su Yuan and forced the entire new Second Army to surrender to Ming. For this matter, Commander Tiger's Mane had given a strict order that if one day they could catch Rong Shao, they should not be polite to him. Lu Zhuo naturally remembered this in his heart. He thought that this person was still abusing his power in Shajing City. He never thought that he would meet him here. How could he be polite? Of course, he would teach him a lesson first. The miserable Rong Shao was beaten up by Lu Zhuo on the spot. He knelt on the ground and vomited. He did not even have the strength to stand up. Lu Zhuo stopped and said to the soldiers beside him, "Come, lift him up and send him to Bugnam of Gojoseon for punishment." Without a leader, the 100,000 Ming army could not form an effective resistance. Even if some of the Ming army generals wanted to resist and make contributions, they could only resist for a few hours under the crazy attack of the 5-star army cavalry. In the end, they could not escape the fate of being surrounded and surrendered. Yang Qindong appeared at the gate of the first city with 1,000 black cavalry at noon. The first thing he saw was the captives of the Ming army and the money and supplies that they did not have time to transport when they escaped. "Young master, it's a big harvest." Beta Persei looked at all this with a grin. Yang Chendong was also in a good mood. He thought that with 70,000 Liaodong iron cavalry and 50,000 Walla elite cavalry, even if they won this battle, they would have to pay a certain price. He did not expect that Shi Hung was so afraid of death that he escaped so quickly. This was naturally because of the previous strategies that worked, but it also had a lot to do with the incompetence of the commander of the Bai Ming army. Young master, young master. Not far away, a group of cavalry galloped over, and the shout could be heard clearly even though it was still far away. It's Tiger's head. Beta Persei had good eyesight and recognized the person who came. He was also excited. It had been more than 2 years since the last time they were separated. Anyone would be excited to see each other again, especially Tiger's Mane, who came over on horseback, jumped off his horse when he was still more than 10 meters away from Yang Chendong and ran over. Facing this errand boy and servant who had accompanied him since he was a child, Yang Chendong was also filled with emotions, and his eyes involuntarily became gentle. Young master, you're finally here. Tiger's Mane, who fell 10 feet in front of White Dragon, couldn't help but cry. Quick, help Tiger's head up. Yang Chendong couldn't stand to say this the most. He could see tens of thousands of soldiers fighting and even dying on the battlefield, but he just couldn't bear to see these men in tears. Beta Persei dismounted from his horse and helped Tiger's Mane, who was kneeling on the ground up. Tiger's Mane, who seemed to have just calmed down, burst into tears again because of Yang Chendong's words. You've worked hard. Unlike parting, Tiger's Mane was a person who would rather break than bend. He had even prepared to live and die with the first city. He also thought that he would never see the young master again in his life. At this time, seeing him again, one could imagine how excited he was. Young master, you're becoming more and more mature and charming, Tiger's Mane couldn't help but say after looking up and sizing up Yang Chendong. When he first entered the capital of the great Ming dynasty, Yang Chendong was only a young man who was less than 20 years old. But now he was nearly 30 years old and was a mature, middle-aged man. Even the corners of his mouth had grown a beard. How could people not be moved? Ha, Tiger's Mane, your flattery skills have also improved. With Yang Chendong's laughter, the atmosphere at the scene suddenly became much more cheerful. After Tiger's Mane, Yang Si Yumian and the others came to greet him one by one. Yang Chendong gave each of them verbal encouragement, making them feel the warmth and importance of being close to them. After everyone greeted each other, they talked about the current situation of the battle. Tiger's Mane took the initiative to report, Young master, except for more than 10,000 people who died or were injured in battle, the rest of the 100,000 Bai Ming army surrendered and were captured. Among them, the commander-in-chief, Rong Shao, was also captured alive by us. You can do whatever you want with him. Very good. Yang Chendong nodded happily. This battle is much smoother than I thought. Everyone has put in a lot of effort and should be rewarded. Ha ha ha. Everyone chuckled when they heard this. However, only one person had a straight face. When he saw that Yang Chendong seemed to be in a good mood, he suddenly stepped forward and said, King, I don't want to be rewarded. I only request to participate in the hunting mission. Please allow it. The person who spoke was the commander of the new light cavalry, Ma Xiangshan. It was obvious that he was still angry about being stopped by the Liaodong cavalry. This time he wanted to take revenge. When Ma Xiangshan first met Yang Chendong, they were still at Hightown. At that time, he had shown his strength and questioned Yang Chendong's horsemanship. In the end, it ended with the White Dragon being subdued. After not seeing each other for many years, the moment he opened his mouth, it was as if he was in a difficult position. Tiger's Mane, Yang Si, Yumian, and the others were all shocked and angrily rebuked him. Today, Yang Chendong was no longer the Yang Chendong of Hightown. He was now the Bugnam of Gojoseon. The territory he had was comparable to the great Ming dynasty, and the number of troops he had was enough to dominate the great Ming dynasty. How could he allow others to question the military plans he made? If Yang Qindong became angry and punished Ma Xiangshan, no one would be able to say anything. Chapter 1184. Commander Ma, what are you doing? Hurry up and apologize to the king. Tiger's mane was the first to speak. It was clear that he still cared for and valued this person. Commander Ma, hurry up and apologize. Yu Mian, Yang Si, and the others also spoke up. Lu Jue and the others, who felt that they had lost face, also hurriedly winked at Ma Xiangshan, reminding him within the appropriate range. Seeing that everyone was reprimanding him and showing concern for him, Ma Xiangshan realized that he had caused trouble. Yang Qindong was not Tiger's mane, who could voice out his opinions in person. He immediately knelt on the ground and kowtowed to Yang Qindong. King, please forgive this subordinate's reckless words. Young master, you see, Ma Xiangshan's temper is like this. He speaks without thinking. In fact, he doesn't mean anything else, and he doesn't mean to question your decision. Please forgive his reckless behavior. Yes, Commander Ma is usually a good person. He is loyal and reliable and does things seriously. Yang Si is willing to vouch for him. He did not mean to be disrespectful. Yang Si also spoke up at this moment, and his knees went soft as he knelt on the ground. The originally happy and harmonious scene instantly became like this. Everyone didn't even dare to breathe loudly. Yang Qindong's expression did not change, but he lamented in his heart. In the past, he always heard people say that it was lonely at the top and that an emperor would not have any friends. He never believed it. However, everything that happened in front of him vividly taught him a lesson. It made him understand that now everyone was actively keeping a distance from him. This might be a show of respect. However, from now on, it would not be so easy for him to be friends with these people and hear some truth. Young master, look. Seeing that Yang Qindong did not speak for a long time, and even his brother Yang Si was kneeling on the ground to plead for Ma Xiangshan, Beta Persei finally could not hold it in any more. He asked tentatively in a low voice with a pleading expression on his face. Puchi. When Yang Qindong saw Beta Persei's reaction, he finally could not help but laugh out loud. He then pointed the crowd and said, "What are you doing? What are you all doing? Do you really think that just because I, the young master, am in a higher position will become estranged?" Commander Ma only gave a suggestion. He didn't do anything. Why should I punish him? Why don't you all get up? Yang Qindong said with a smile on his face. Obviously, he was not angry. Tiger's man and the others let out a sigh of relief. But at the same time, they did not deliberately remind Ma Xiangshan to thank him. Ma Xiangshan was very clear that his actions just now were very uncomfortable. This time his apology was sincere. Your Majesty, it's all my fault. I didn't think before speaking. Thank you for your forgiveness. Well, it's not a big deal. Besides, Commander Ma gave a military suggestion. This is what a military officer should do. There's nothing wrong with it. Not to mention, it's very reasonable. We sent too few cavalry to chase after them. Since the new army is made up of cavalry, of course, they should perform better. Not only was Yang Qindong not angry, but he also took the initiative to say what everyone wanted to say. For a moment, everyone's eyes gathered on him again. According to the military action plan that Yang Qindong had previously set, considering that the new army had been fighting for so many days, once the battle started and they broke through the joint defense line of the Ming army and the Walla army, what they had to do was to capture prisoners and clean up the battlefield. Relatively speaking, this task was the easiest and safest. It was also beneficial for the new army to quickly recover their strength. But now, the Ming army's front line was broken through so easily. This was really beyond Yang Qindong's expectations. Because of this, some changes could be made to the previous military plan. Noticing that everyone was looking at him with hopeful eyes, Yang Qindong asked seriously, after being besieged for so long and with the lack of food, are you sure that your strength hasn't declined and you can participate in the next tough battle? No problem. In just an instant, all the division-level generals of the new army spoke in unison. Ignoring everyone's answer, Yang Qindong's eyes fell on Tiger's mane. He wanted to hear his opinion. He didn't want to blindly agree because these people wanted to show off. Once there was a problem, it would be a big problem. Tiger's mane obviously understood what Yang Qindong meant. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he lowered his head and pondered for a moment. Then he raised his head and said, "Young master, most of them don't have any problems. Although the siege seems dangerous, as cavalry, they don't really have many opportunities to go up the city tower. In addition, Yangtze took out the stored food half a month ago. During this period of time, everyone's physical strength has been replenished. They can accept the mission of continuous battle." Well, you said that most of them don't have any problems. That means that some of them have problems. Tell me which divisions need to stay behind. Yang Qindong understood the hidden meaning in Tiger's mane's words. He also needed someone to stay behind to clean up the battlefield and look after the prisoners. He couldn't let the new army rush up at once. If that happened, what would happen to the safety of the beginning city? Yes, young master, I personally think that the 1st Cavalry Division and the 2nd Cavalry Division should stay behind. The other divisions can join the battle immediately. Tiger's mane didn't even turn his head. He could even imagine that his subordinates would definitely look at him with hopeful gazes. However, it was good to want to render meritorious service. However, if they didn't have enough strength and forcefully stood out, it wouldn't be meritorious service but courting death. When he mentioned the 1st Cavalry Division and the 2nd Cavalry Division, Lu Zhuo and Dang Yu's expressions immediately became very ugly. However, they had nothing to say. Previously, when they were defending the city, the 70,000 soldiers that Yangtze had prepared couldn't hold on any longer. The 2 divisions even abandoned their horses and rushed up the city tower. Only then did they protect the city. Because of this, their losses weren't small. Now, it was most appropriate for them to stay behind to defend the city and look after the prisoners. After Tiger's mane finished speaking, no one objected. Yang Qindong knew that this should be a result that everyone could accept. He immediately said, "Very good. If that's the case, the 1st Cavalry Division and the 2nd Cavalry Division will stay behind. Heavy Cavalry Regiment, listen to my orders. You are ordered to wander around Tulu City. If you find any Ming army that wants to come out, fight them back. If there are too many enemy soldiers, you can return to the beginning city at any time to ask for reinforcements." Yes, the Heavy Cavalry Regiment's commander, Windchaser, immediately agreed excitedly. Light Cavalry Regiment and Reconnaissance Regiment, rest for a while. After that, you will set off with this king and kill your way to the Hanoi area. This time, we will make the Wara pay the price. I want Yeshin's head. Yang Qindong's voice became louder and louder as he spoke. The 2 commanders, Ma Xiangshan and Ding Shan, immediately agreed loudly. As the war went surprisingly smoothly, Yang Qindong's vision was no longer limited to taking back the lost cities. Instead, he wanted to make a crusade against his enemies and opponents. And this time his target was the leader of the Wara Yeshen. Although Ming was also an opponent, after all, they had a deep foundation and were powerful. If he tangled with them now, he didn't know how many troops and time he would have to invest. This was not in line with Yang Qindong's current development goal. It was better to let go of the opponent first and clench his fists to deal with Yeshen first. Of course, if Ming didn't know what was good for them and still came out to mess things up, then he didn't mind fighting a few more battles with them. The new army's military plan had been adjusted. Everyone went to prepare. Using these few hours of reorganization, Yang Qindong came to the big tent outside the city. He separately received the Far Eastern Army's commander Chen Bo, Mabe Division's commander Xian Honghai, Naraizong, and the Mongolian generals who had joined the 5-star army. During the process of receiving them, Yang Qindong gave full recognition and praise to everyone's performance, making every general feel a sense of importance. When everyone walked out of the tent, their faces were full of satisfaction and excitement, especially at the end when Yang Qindong sacrificed himself to analyze the situation for them. It made them have a clearer understanding of the next step and plan. For example, the Far Eastern Army's commander Qinbo. Yang Qindong straightforwardly asked him to rush back to the Far Eastern province. The environment there was complicated, and they couldn't lack the deterrence of the army. Of course, this time they didn't come in vain. After the supply line was opened, soon new supplies would be sent from the sea through the Liaodong region. This time, when Qinbo and the others returned, they could send a large number of logistical supplies back. This would play a very positive role in speeding up the development of the Far Eastern province. Sixth young master, I will leave you a division. Next, we will deal with Yes Hen of the Wara. He is not an easy person to deal with. Of course, the more the better. I also want to let my soldiers see the true style of the 5-star Army's cavalry. Qinbo was in favor of withdrawing the army back to the Far Eastern province. Originally, this time, he came here to launch a surprise attack and rescue the heavily injured Mo Bay City and Shur City. Now that the mission was completed, of course, he had to go back. However, he still hoped to leave a division behind so that they could learn more from Yang Qindong. In the face of Qinbo's request, Yang Qindong thought about it for a while and agreed. No matter what, he was still the commander of an army. Moreover, he stayed in that bitter cold place all year round. If he made a request, he would have to fulfill it. After Qinbo left a division behind, Narasong was also allowed to bring 20,000 Mongolian cavalry to participate in the next battle. Yang Qindong only had one request for him, and that was to follow orders. Since those small Mongolian tribes wanted to have a share of the pie in the war, they must obey orders and follow orders. If they couldn't do this, then they should leave as soon as possible. Now, Yang Xie didn't have to rely on these small Mongolian tribes. Chapter 1185. Yang Xie's continued growth and economic development, especially after defeating the Baiming army and the world of Wara, made the small Mongolian tribes see the rise of a powerful 5-star army, a new force. They could only look up to the 5-star army and didn't dare to have the slightest disrespect. After knowing that the order was personally given by Bugnam of Gojoseon, no one dared to refuse. They all said that they would obey the military order, and some even directly said that they wanted to join the 5-star army. In their opinion, finding a strong backer would be more beneficial to their tribe's future development. For those who wanted to rely on him, Yang Qindong didn't have no choice but to accept all of them. He asked Yang Er to investigate carefully and make sure that their strength could play a role before accepting them. On the contrary, some of the small tribe leaders who had their own plans were already dead in Yang Qindong's heart. For the future generations, he wouldn't allow other armed forces to exist under his rule. Even if they were to rely on him, he wouldn't allow them to join the 5-star army. He also had to disrupt their original organization, which meant that he had to completely eat them up. In the future, people who joined him and rebelled often happened, and it happened more than once. It also caused a lot of headaches for those who thought that they were broad-minded. Yang Qindong didn't want to make this kind of mistake again. Either they were completely used by the 5-star army, or they were completely destroyed. There was no third choice. Of course, this wasn't something that could be done just by saying it. If he wanted to do this, it would take a long time. What Yang Qindong needed to do was to shorten this process as much as possible and completely unify the entire Mongolian grassland. After meeting the generals and assigning them their respective tasks, the last person Yang Qindong met was the captured Baiming general, or more precisely the businessman, Rong Shao. This businessman who used the commercial resources of the 5-star army and relied on his identity as a Han to make a fortune. Now, he actually used the money he earned from the 5-star army to deal with the 5-star army. With this kind of two-faced character, Yang Qindong couldn't tolerate him. He had to kill him as an example to those who had bad intentions. Rong Shao, who was tied up, was like a fat pig that was about to be slaughtered. He was tied to a piece of wood and carried into the tent. As he entered, a fishy stench spread throughout the tent. Beta Persei, who was standing on the side, wrinkled his nose, asked with an unhappy expression, "What's going on? Did you throw him into a cesspool?" Second brother, no, he was so scared that he peed and pooped. I just gave him a simple wash, but I didn't expect him to pee again. Longwei's captain, Ba Daojiang, who was responsible for bringing him in, said with a face full of disdain, "Humph, you dare to make an enemy out of our 5-star army with just this little bit of ability?" Knowing that this was all because Rong Shao was too cowardly, Yang Er snorted unhappily. Yang Qindong's expression was normal. In the past, in order to complete a mission, he had come into contact with all kinds of environments. It was just some strange smells. It really didn't make him feel any discomfort. He first looked at Rong Shao, who had fainted from fright, and nodded. "Come, wake him up." Splash! A large bucket of cold water was then handed over to Rong Shao. A wave of coldness directly stimulated him, causing him to struggle and shout loudly. "Ah, don't kill me! Don't kill me! I'm willing to surrender to the 5-star army. I'm willing to serve the grandfathers of the 5-star army." Rong Shao really didn't have backbone. If it was said that he was tortured by Longwei for a period of time, he was already scared out of his wits at this moment, and he couldn't help but shout when he woke up. After shouting for a while, he found that no one was paying attention to him. Only then did he have the courage to open his eyes and look at the surroundings. He saw Bugnam of Gojoseon, Yang Qindong, sitting at the head of the tent wearing a golden robe. Ah, Bugnam of Gojoseon. Rong Shao, who was once met by Yang Qindong because he was a businessman, immediately recognized Bugnam of Gojoseon's identity, and his eyes flashed with panic and surprise. Speaking of which, he felt sorry for Bugnam. Now that Bugnam of Gojoseon had found him, he was not afraid. But he believed even more that the king of hell was easy to meet, and the little devils were hard to deal with. Compared to those Longwei who used various means to deal with him, he believed that Yang Qindong should be easier to talk to, because people with such an identity would not take him seriously. As long as the other party was happy, he might be let go like a fart. Thinking of this, Rong Shao, who was lying on the ground, suddenly got up and came to a place 5 meters in front of Yang Qindong at a fast speed. He kowtowed to the ground. "Bugnam of Gojoseon, I was wrong. Please be magnanimous and spare my life. I promise that the Rong family will completely obey your orders in the future and work for the 5-star army. I will be your dog in the future, and I will bite whoever you ask me to. By the way, our Rong family has been doing business for generations, and we have a lot of connections in Ming. If you want to do something, we will definitely do it well and won't let you down. I only ask that you spare my life to show your magnanimity and magnanimity. I believe that many people will join you." Rong Shao deserved to be a businessman. When he said these words, he didn't even stutter. It was as if these words had been rehearsed by him many times in his heart. The Rong family had indeed been doing business for generations. They had experienced being looked down upon by others at the beginning, and now they had a wide influence. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been conferred the title of general and could lead 100,000 soldiers just because they had done one thing. It was a good thing for the 5-star army and Yang Qindong to have such a congenial person. With them around, he would be able to gain a better understanding of the northern Ming dynasty. Or if it was another person, he would nod and agree. Unfortunately, he met Yang Qindong. It was because of Rong Shao that the new Second Army had experienced a tragedy. Even among the captives in the Battle of the First City, many people who were originally from the new Second Army had been captured. Some of them had really betrayed Ming, while some of them hadn't. It was just that the environment had forced them to work hard for Ming in order to survive. It was because of Rong Shao that the commander and the others had experienced a humiliation that they would never forget in their lives. This kind of approach was often more uncomfortable than killing them. If it weren't for Yang Qindong's enough trust in the commander, he and the entire new Second Army would not have a good ending. It was because of Rong Shao that the 100,000 people in Shaojing City and Jingzhou City had not seen the sun for several months. The happy smile on their faces in the past had disappeared. Instead, they were living like walking corpses. No one wanted to experience the feeling of going from heaven to hell again. It was because of Rong Shao that the guard captain, Wu Xiaoyi, had to die to show his loyalty. Such a loyal person who protected his master was killed by this villain in front of him. It was because of Rong Shao that the two cities had to temporarily rely on Ming in order to survive. Because of this, Ming and the War of Wara had no scruples and could besiege the first city. So many good soldiers had died tragically. It was because of Rong Shao there were many more that Yang Qindong didn't want to say or think about. And all of this was because of Rong Shao's personal reasons. In the face of such a person who could be said to have committed a heinous crime, even if there was a flower in the sky, how could he forgive him? Compared to the benefits of getting along well with the Rong family, if Rong Shao didn't die, how many people would be disappointed? How could he face the heroes who died in the defense of the first city and the soldiers of the new Second Army? Rong Shao must die. This was the ending that no one could change, but he shouldn't die here but in Shaojing City. It should be handled by Ming and the others. Take him down and send him to the new Second Army. It's okay as long as he doesn't die in the process. These words had already represented Rong Shao's ending. There was even a hidden meaning in the words. That was, he would let everyone torture Rong Shao along the way, as long as Rong Shao didn't die. It was best to let him suffer a fate worse than death, and let him know what would happen if he offended the 5-star army. It was almost time, and Yang Qindong was ready to set off with the army. In contrast, the Wara had run for several hours. Although Tian Hu and the others had already chased after them, they were alone and didn't bring enough money and food, so they couldn't be at ease. Order the new 1st Army Reconnaissance Regiment to be the left vanguard, responsible for the safety of the left wing. Order the new 1st Army Light Cavalry Regiment to be the right vanguard, responsible for the safety of the right wing. Order the 20,000 Mongolian troops, led by Nari Song and the 1st Cavalry Division of the Far Eastern Army, Daikwa, to be the middle. Order the 4th Army Division to be the rear, escorting the army's money and food. Set off. In the big tent, Yang Qindong shook his arm and shouted. More than 50,000 troops went south from the first city. Looking at the back of the army, the new 1st Army commander, Tiger's Mane, was filled with emotion. The 5-star army has completely grown up. Yes, but our future mission is still a long way to go. Yu Mian, the lord of the first city, also sighed. Haha, don't be emotional at this time. We still have too many things to do. Reorganizing the captive army and preparing to receive the new supplies. We still need the cooperation of the army commander and the lord of the first army. Yang Si chuckled, looking quite proud. It was no wonder that he was so happy. More than 70,000 Wala cavalry, more than 90,000 Ming infantrymen, and nearly 70,000 infantrymen from Shi Wanshan's headquarters. This was more than 200,000 troops, and now they all needed to be reorganized. This task mostly fell on him, the logistics division commander. Although the task was heavy, he was very happy. With so many troops, he could do a lot of things in the future. Don't worry, we will fully support you if you need anything, Yu Mian also said with a smile. But at the same time, he didn't forget to put forward a condition. It's just that the inner and outer walls of the first city have been damaged in this battle. With so many laborers, can Division Commander Yang Si help me? That's not a problem. We don't have anything else now, but we have people. Ha ha ha. Yang Si laughed. At this moment, not only him, but Tiger's Mane and Yu Mian also laughed together. Chapter 1186. Compared to the joy of the new army, at this time, Shi Hung was leading the army to strengthen the defense of Tulu City. In the battle outside the beginning city, the Ming army was defeated and retreated. Rong Xiao's 100,000 troops were all captured by the Five-Star Army. Not only that, he just received news that Shajing and Jingzhou City were once again controlled by the Five-Star Army's new Second Army and returned to the embrace of Bugnam of Gojoseon. All kinds of unfavorable news came, and Shi Heng's face became very ugly. He already knew that this attack on the grasslands had ended in failure. He didn't dare to imagine what kind of reaction the emperor would have once he knew this news. What he had to do now was to mend the pen after the sheep were lost and find someone to take the blame. Shi Heng's earliest preparation was to let Xin Guang, who retreated first, take the blame. For this reason, he also ordered Xin Guang, who retreated to Tulu City, to be arrested. Now he was in the dungeon's interrogation room. He hoped that he could use his words to persuade the other party to take all the blame. This way, his responsibility as the commander would be reduced by a lot. In order to strengthen his power, Shi Heng also invited Fang Dingshan over. The two of them interrogated one person together, which was enough to give Xin Guang face. Bring people to commit the crime. Shi Heng said with some momentum as he slammed the wooden block on the desk. Bring people to commit. Wei. Wu. The group of yamen runners standing on both sides also shouted loudly, raising the tense atmosphere to the extreme. In the midst of the shouting, Xin Guang, shackled, walked into the hall under the protection of two bailiffs. Although he was still far away, the clattering sound could be heard. The shouts continued, as if to create an extremely tense atmosphere. Shi Heng, who was sitting behind the desk, was already waiting to see Xin Guang's current appearance. Xin Guang's face would definitely turn pale, and he would kneel down and beg for mercy the moment he saw him. If that was the case, wouldn't Xin Guang have to say whatever he wanted him to say? The greater the expectation, the greater the disappointment. Xin Guang finally appeared, but he did not show the slightest sign of fear. Instead, he looked lazy and sleepy. When he saw Shi Heng and Fang Dingshan, he even yawned and said with a smile, "Sigh, even if I caught the wrong person, I shouldn't have let Marquis and General Fang come here personally. I'm really flattered." He did not seem to be afraid at all. On the contrary, he was so calm. In the eyes of Shi Heng and Fang Dingshan, they were surprised. The two of them first looked at each other. After confirming that the person who came was Xin Guang, Shi Heng suddenly picked up the wooden block and said, "Xin Guang, don't pretend to be crazy here. Marquis is asking you, do you know your crime?" The sound of the wooden block reverberated in the interrogation room. It was quite imposing. However, this was nothing to Xin Guang, who was like a hob. He could even laugh and said, "Crime? What crime have I committed?" "You." Shi Heng was really angered by Xin Guang's shameless behavior. He pointed at him and said, "You led the troops to retreat without a military order, which led to our defeat in the Battle of Beginning City. Isn't this enough to sentence you to death?" "What? Is there such a thing?" Xin Guang said with an obedient look. "What? You dare to do it, but you don't dare to admit it? Deputy Commander Xin, this is not what a man should do." Fang Dingshan, the deputy judge at the side, finally spoke. He could not stand the kind of generals who fled in the face of battle. They were obviously not very capable, but they were in a high position. Such people were like vermin and were really hateful. Facing Fang Dingshan's interrogation, Xin Guang was also not anxious. "General Fang, who are you talking about? From what I know, when faced with the charge of the Five-Star Army, you didn't even fire a single arrow before retreating. Could it be that your actions are what a man should do?" At this moment, Fang Dingshan's face flushed red. He was actually being questioned in return. He was not as thick-skinned as Xin Guang, who could be indifferent in the face of questioning. Although he was greedy for money, he also cherished his reputation. He immediately said angrily, "Bullshit! The reason why the Liaodong cavalry retreated was because Admiral Shi gave a military order. We followed the order, and also to preserve the strength of our Ming army." "Oh, if that's the case, then I also retreated to preserve my strength. Sin Guang was good with words and directly used the other party's reason to explain his actions. This is not the same, Fang Dingshan said angrily. I retreated because I received the admiral's order. You didn't. You think I didn't do it just because you said so? Ask Marquis. Didn't you give me the order to retreat first? Sin Guang ignored Fang Dingshan and looked at Shi Heng, who was sitting on the other side. The situation is like this. When the admiral saw that Rong Xiao, who was the vanguard, didn't know how to command and fight, and was the first to escape, he relied on his many years of experience on the battlefield. In order to preserve more strength, he immediately gave the order for the entire army to retreat. It was under this order that our Great Tong Army and General Fang's Liaodong cavalry took the opportunity to retreat back to Tulu City. This sealed off the Five-Star Army's entrance to Baiming, and at the same time preserved the strength of the army. In this battle, Marquis' command wasn't wrong. The mistake was Shi Wanshan's betrayal, the Wara's escape, and Rong Xiao's cowardice. This made the opportunity to severely damage the Five-Star Army and even capture Bugnam of Gojoseon go to waste. There was no mistake in the command and preparation of this battle. Marquis and General Fang, was that not the case? As if he was telling a story, Sin Guang's words were full of chapters and chapters as he narrated the entire story. Shi Heng and Fang Dingshan were stunned when they heard this. If they didn't experience it themselves, they would also think that this was what happened. Without waiting for the two to react, Sin Guang continued, Of course, if the two of you insist that I am guilty, then there is another explanation. Admiral Shi didn't know how to maintain a good relationship between the two armies, so the Wara suddenly retreated at a critical moment. Admiral Shi and Fang Dingshan saw that the situation was going to change, so in order to protect their own lives, they forced Rong Xiao to lead 100,000 soldiers to their deaths. Only Vice General Sin Guang saw the problem, but because they had been besieging the city for many days, their strength was limited. So in order to preserve the strength of the army, they had no choice but to retreat first. Unfortunately, in order to cover up the truth, Admiral Shi killed all the witnesses and pushed all the blame to Sin Guang. In the blink of an eye, it was a completely different explanation. After saying this, Sin Guang intentionally shrugged and said, Right, I've already written a memorial for the second explanation. As long as I don't leave this place today, someone will send it to Baiming. When the time comes, His Majesty will definitely see it. Perhaps he won't believe it, or perhaps he will. In that case, everything will be up to the heavens. Naturally, the choice is still in the hands of the two of you. Do as you see fit. At this moment, Sin Guang was extremely relaxed. He didn't seem like a criminal at all. On the contrary, he seemed more like an interrogator. The second explanation was like a heavy hammer to Shi Heng and Fang Dingshan's heads. The two of them couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. Only now did they realize that they had somewhat underestimated this Sin Guang in the past. It turned out that this was a smart person. They didn't know that everything Sin Guang did was the idea given to him by Su Dei, and this idea came from Yang Qindong. No wonder Shi Heng and Fang Dingshan were stunned. In this battle, Su Dei originally wanted to take the opportunity to return to the embrace of the Five-Star Army. He was even confident that he could capture Sin Guang and make a great contribution. However, this was not what Yang Qindong wanted. A good-for-nothing general like Sin Guang would not be an obstacle to Yang Qindong's unification of the world. On the contrary, having such a person by Ming would only be beneficial and not harmful to him. Once he captured him, not only would he not be able to severely damage the strength of the Baiming army, but he would also help the other party to eliminate villains. Why would Yang Qindong do that? As for Su Dei, he played an unparalleled role in the battle outside the beginning city. It was better for such a person to continue to stay in the Baiming army. At least now was not the time for him to come to the Five-Star Army. Of course, Yang Qindong would remember all these contributions in his heart. Once he returned one day, he would definitely give them a position that he was satisfied with. Having said that, Sun Guang's 2 statements entered the ears of the 2 generals. As long as one was not stupid, one would naturally know how to choose. Although there was a hint of being threatened, whether it was Shi Hung or Fang Dingshan, they were the kind of people who cared about their reputation. They absolutely did not want to have a scandal, let alone lose the imperial favor. In the end, the 2 looked at each other and laughed. Then Shi Hung said, "Deputy Commander Tsin is indeed a pillar of the country. It seems that everything is really a misunderstanding. Come, quickly remove the shackles." Tsin Guang was released just like that. The explanation to the outside world was that his withdrawal was originally approved by the admiral. It was just that he withdrew too quickly, so it caused a misunderstanding. Following that, Tsin Guang's first statement was written into a memorial to the emperor and reported to the Daizong emperor. The 50,000 cavalrymen of Walla were like a black whirlwind on the grassland, heading straight toward Shajing City. At the most critical moment, Yes Hen was the first to withdraw his troops. He did not dare to gamble. He did not dare to believe in his ally, the Baiming army, which led to a great defeat outside the beginning city. Of course, the Baiming army was defeated. They lost 100,000 troops. For Yes Hen, it was just some provisions that could not be taken away because he was in a hurry. When he returned to Hanoi and gathered his general, Beaumeur, provisions would not be a problem. Leader, the fast horse scouts reported that the 5-star army is still chasing us 50 miles behind us. They have not given up. General Chao Lu rode to Yeshen's side and reported in a hurry. Chapter 1187. They're still chasing? How many people do they have? Yeshen's face flashed with anger. He had already been defeated, but he was still the first army to retreat. This was giving enough face to the 5-star army. Moreover, when he attacked the beginning city, he didn't use a single soldier, saber, or sword. On the contrary, he even lost 100,000 soldiers when he attacked North Desert City. No matter how he looked at it, he was the one who suffered a loss. Why was the 5-star army so tightly holding on to him and not letting him go? Replying to the leader, they have about 50,000 people. They have more people than us. Among them, there is also the existence of the most elite existence, like the 1st Cavalry Division. When Chao Lu answered these questions, he felt a chill down his spine. Unlike Baiming and Southern Ming, where most of the soldiers were infantry, the 1st Cavalry Division was in the limelight in the grasslands where the majority of the soldiers were cavalry. It was not something that other tribes and forces could compare to. A person's name was like a tree's shadow. For many people in the grasslands, the 1st Cavalry Division represented a destructive existence. Continue to retreat. When he heard that the other side had more people than him, and that there was the existence of the invincible elite existence like the 1st Cavalry Division, Yes Hen lost the desire to compete. He helplessly shook his head and gave the order to continue the retreat. Reporting. Just as Yes Hen gave the order, the fast horse scout in front of him came in front of him again. Reporting to the leader, "There's a group of cavalry with the banner of the 5-star army 30 miles in front of us. They are blocking our way. There's a 5-star army cavalry in front of us." Yes Hen was shocked by this news. "Leader, it should be the 5-star army's new 2nd army." Chao Lu thought of something and whispered to Yes Hen. Slapping his forehead, Yes Hen nodded. "That's right, it should be them. Humph, the useless Baiming. After conquering 2 cities, don't they know how to completely destroy the new 2nd army? Now, they've become popular again. Yes, the Baiming army is too incompetent. But Chief, now that they are targeting us, what should we do?" Chao Lu was also complaining about the incompetence of the Baiming army, but now was not the time to complain. Instead, he had to face the problem. "What else can we do? Let's split up and meet the enemy. The rest of the cavalry will circle around them and rush back to Hanoi." Helplessly, he said, In the past, if a mere new Second Army dared to stop 50,000 elite cavalrymen from Wara, Yes Hen would definitely teach them a lesson. But now he couldn't take such a risk. Once his main force was entangled with the enemy, the 5-star army cavalry would catch up to him. If that happened, he wouldn't be able to escape even if he wanted to. This was to strengthen the soil and break the wrist. Chow Lu asked carefully, "Chief, how many people should we send to meet the enemy?" Everyone knew that the cavalrymen sent to meet the new Second Army would never return. But the number of people was the key. If there were too few, it wouldn't be effective. If there were too many, the losses would be too great. It was not a good choice. Send 20,000 soldiers. After all, the new Second Army's strength is greatly damaged. If we send more people, they might be able to rush out and meet up with us in Hanoi. Yes Hen was indeed an ambitious person. Without even thinking about it, he betrayed all 20,000 of his men. The so-called sending more people to defeat the new Second Army was just an excuse. In the end, Yes Hen was afraid that if he sent too few people, they wouldn't be able to entangle the new Second Army and affect his escape plan. Chow Lu was naturally aware of this point. But this was the chief's order, so he had to carry it out. He immediately agreed and went to make the arrangements. "We'll leave from the sides," Yes Hen said with heartache. When they came with 150,000 soldiers. But when they returned, they only had 30,000 men and horses. They even lost their provisions. This was an undeniable defeat. In front of the small yellow river in front of Shajing City, the new Second Army was laying in ambush here, waiting for the Wara cavalrymen to escape here. They wanted to take advantage of the situation and kill them. Report: General, the Wara cavalry has split up. 30,000 of them left from the flanks. About 20,000 of them are heading straight for us. The scout in charge of scouting turned back and reported to the general standing in front of the army. Understood. Shpai nodded with a solemn expression. Obviously, this situation was completely within his expectations. The enemy has split up, so the pressure on us has decreased a lot. Now we're only dealing with 20,000 cavalrymen. Everyone must cheer up and show the might of the new Second Army. Yes, Kong Ji and the other 2 division commanders replied loudly. In fact, even if there were 20,000 Walla cavalry, it would still be a huge pressure for the new Second Army. After going through so many things, the new Second Army was now short of an infantry division, and the other 3 divisions were not complete. At most, there were only 18,000 soldiers. Moreover, the number of horses in the army was not enough. Many of the original cavalrymen had to be converted to infantry because of the lack of horses. Kang Ji looked at his subordinates, who were supposed to have more than 8,000 cavalrymen, but now there were only about 4,000 cavalrymen and 2,000 infantry. He couldn't help but curse. It's all because of those damn Bai Ming. They stole our horses. Otherwise, with the strength of the new Second Army, it would be easy to deal with 20,000 cavalrymen. Okay, Mr. Kong, don't complain. Save some strength to deal with the enemy. Go and check on the preparation of the bows and arrows. She understood Kong Ji's frustration. How could he not be the same? However, this was a war. It was not a war where 2 people could curse each other. It was not a war where one could win by talking. Although Su Yuan betrayed the 5-star army and ended up with his corpse, he still did some good things. For example, a large number of military supplies were stored in Shajing City. Among them, bows and caltrops were the most abundant. Considering that the most likely enemy on the grassland was the cavalrymen, the Bai Ming army was well prepared. Because the Bai Ming army was mainly attacking the beginning city this time, many of the equipment that was used to deal with the cavalrymen were temporarily not used. They were left in the city. This time, the new Second Army benefited. Commander, don't worry. The bows and arrows are ready. We also prepared 400 meters of caltrops. I guarantee that the enemy's cavalrymen will suffer heavy losses. Kang Ji's face was full of confidence when he said this. Good. This is a turnaround for the 5-star army. Although we were forced to do what we did before, it is inevitable that some of our brothers will have some opinions about us. Now is the time to prove everything with actions. There must not be any problems. She nodded heavily and said, Now everything was ready. They only lacked the east wind. For hours later, the east wind, which was the enemy, appeared. Looking from afar, it was as if they covered the sky and the earth. People said that there were more than 10,000 soldiers. When 20,000 cavalrymen came from afar, the battle formation could not be described with words. Prepare for battle. Archers, get ready. Kang Ji, the commander of the 1st Cavalry Division, rode on his horse and shouted loudly. There were 6,000 archers in the 3 divisions. They were waiting for the enemy to arrive at the designated location so that they could launch a fatal attack. The earth shook and shouts shook the sky. 20,000 elite cavalrymen of the Walla Empire came from afar, shouting slogans that only the people of the grassland could understand. When the distance between them was still 800 meters, they began to perform all kinds of equestrian tactical movements. They either hid their bodies on the side of the warhorse, or bent their bodies over the horse to minimize the area of their exposed body parts, or they knocked their bows and arrows and prepared to launch a counterattack on the horse. This was an evenly matched battle. There were no tricks to be played. The reason why it was said to be evenly matched was because the Walla cavalry had the advantage in terms of numbers. It was just that they had limited time to fight. If it wasn't for the fact that the elite cavalry of the 5-star army were rushing over, the 20,000 Walla cavalry would not have used such a method of charging. Instead, they would have attacked from the left, middle, and right. Only then would they be able to maximize their advantage in numbers. However, time did not allow for it. They had no choice but to use the wolf pack tactic. The so-called wolf pack tactic could also be called a swarm. It was like a pack of wolves. Once they saw the target, they would tear it into pieces and finally complete the mission of killing and defeating the enemy. It could be said that the ancient cavalry battles were very dangerous. It was about the coordination of tactics, the advantage in numbers, and the use of geographical and weather conditions. Of course, the morale of the 2 armies and the weapons used would also directly affect the final result of the battle. As for the battle between the 2 armies, it was almost impossible for both sides to fight. Unless it was under special circumstances, neither side would choose to do so. It was very difficult to train a general. It required a lot of resources and time. How could they sacrifice themselves in a battle like this? This was just something that movies and TV dramas did on purpose. The 20,000 Walla Army's cavalrymen were approaching step by step, and their speed was very fast. Their forces were also very scattered. It gave people a feeling that they did not know where to start. It was as if the attack was not the main point, and the attack was the main point. This was the essence of the wolf pack tactic. It made the opponent confused and could only choose to attack. In this way, if they did not deal with it well, they could be defeated like a mountain. The reason why the Walla cavalry chose to attack like this was because they had the advantage in numbers. They were thinking of ways to expand their advantage and achieve the military goal of winning the battle. Archers scatter. 300 in a squadron, 100 in a small squad. Adopt a stacked attack. Kang Ji was not someone to be trifled with. Seeing that the opponent was about to expand their advantage in numbers, he was not willing to let it go. He immediately adopted the corresponding countermeasures. Chapter 1188. After the order was given, the 6,000 archers were divided into 20 formations. Each formation had 300 archers, and 100 archers would fire at the same time. After the first row fired their arrows, the second row, then the third row and the first row readied themselves. The cycle repeated itself to achieve the goal of constantly firing arrows. By the time the archers' formation had completely dispersed, the Wa al cavalry was less than 5 li away. At this moment, Shibi's eyes were wide open as he looked forward. He wanted to see the iron caltrops display their might. Charge! Kill! Kill these lambs! Ha ha ha! The battle cries were still coming from all directions. The distance between the two groups increased from 500 meters to 450 meters, then 430 meters, 410 meters, 400 meters. Finally, they arrived at the battlefield of the iron caltrops. The sound of horses falling to the ground could be heard. The caltrops had 6 horns, so they could stand upright no matter where they were thrown. They were also very sharp. Once the caltrops hit a horse's foot, it could be pierced through even if the horse was hit by an iron palm. This was the advantage and power of the caltrops. The Wallach cavalry did not expect the new Second Army to use this tactic. In their opinion, this attack was simply a rash move by the new Second Army. They shouldn't have made more preparations. Otherwise, they wouldn't have adopted the tactic of charging at the beginning. At least, they should have sent some people to test the waters first. They did not expect the Wallach cavalry to be hit by the caltrops. None of the Wallach cavalry in the front could dodge the caltrops. A short distance of 100 meters was enough to knock down 2,000 Wallach cavalry. The momentum of their charge was also halted. The caltrops were limited. In the era when iron was precious, the caltrops were very expensive. Even Ming did not prepare a lot of them. The caltrops could only cover a distance of 100 meters. After this distance, the Wallach cavalry adjusted their posture and started to charge again. When they were about 200 meters ahead and had just picked up their speed, the arrows came from afar. Like a dense rain of attacks, Division Commander Kong Ji gave the order to release the word fire. Ding ding dang dang dang. The arrows flew through the air for over 100 meters before landing on the bodies of the cavalrymen or their war horses. In an instant, there was another scene of men and horses being thrown off their feet. At least 1,000 cavalrymen fell to the ground from the arrows. Cavalry, get ready. Seeing that the 2 waves of preparation had the effect of injuring and obstructing the enemy, Kong Ji's heroic spirit soared. After a shout, he pulled out the sharp saber on his body. Tip of the arrow, charge at the enemy formation. Archers, use protective fire. Charge! Kong Ji, who was issuing military orders, was the first to rush out of the battle formation. This also meant that the new Second Army's counterattack had officially begun. Relying on the caltrops and archers to obstruct the enemy, they effectively suppressed the Wallach cavalry's advance. Kong Ji gave the order to launch an all-out attack. It could be said that he grasped the timing very well. Seeing all this, Songbi nodded in satisfaction. Songbi clenched his fists tightly because he knew that what happened just now was just a small trick. The real battle and bitter battle had just begun. In a chaotic battle like this, there were very few true winners. The only difference was which side would suffer less losses. Songbi clenched his fists tightly. His face was tense. In a battle like this, being a bystander was far less relaxing than slaughtering his way into the battle. At the very least, he didn't have to think so much when he entered the battlefield. All he had to do was to continuously kill the enemy and prevent himself from being killed. However, Yang Qindong had already set the rules for the 5-star army. In such a chaotic battle, the high-ranking officers were not allowed to participate personally. This time, Kong Ji was able to personally participate because the morale of the new Second Army had suffered a huge blow. Now that they urgently needed a leader, Commander Kong Ji rushed out. Otherwise, even he would have to stand outside the battlefield and watch everything from a bystander's point of view. The cruel battle had begun. Weapons clashed against weapons, warhorses clashed against warhorses, and humans clashed against each other. From time to time, there would be arrows falling into the battlefield. At this moment, no one could guarantee that the arrows wouldn't kill the enemy and harm the soldiers. At most, the probability of it happening would be lower. Therefore, on the battlefield, there were many cavalrymen who died in the hands of their own archers. However, This didn't stop the archers from continuing to shoot arrows. After all, even if the arrows were used as support, the number of arrows would still be higher. This was a battle where there were no winners. In a chaotic battle, individual strength played a huge role. Luck also played a huge role in winning and losing. For example, many cavalrymen who went berserk would hurt their own soldiers from time to time. In such a chaotic battle, even if you had the ability to fight against 100 people, you might not be able to escape death. Unless it was a high-ranking officer like Kong Ji, there would be dozens or even hundreds of soldiers following him wherever he went. At least they could provide some protection. War was cruel. The cavalrymen fought back and forth. From time to time, there would be people who were knocked off their war horses. However, this didn't mean that they lost their ability to fight. On the contrary, there were more and more people who dismounted to fight. This made it so that sometimes not only did they have to guard against being on horseback, they also had to guard against ambushes from below. Perhaps when they were swinging their swords at the enemy, the war horses' hooves would be chopped off. Then they would lose their balance and fall off the horse. If they weren't prepared, perhaps the moment they fell off the horse, there would already be a large sword floating above their head. And it was precisely this kind of chaotic battle that lasted for nearly an hour. In the end, there was no clear winner. Finally, it was announced that the Walla cavalry had left. Worried that the 5-star army behind them would catch up, the 20,000 Walla cavalry didn't make any more moves. They only charged blindly. After charging through the new Second Army's defensive line, they left. As for those who didn't charge through, they were either killed or taken captive. 2 hours later, both sides had paid a heavy price, and the battle was coming to an end. Kong Ji, who was covered in blood, whether it was his own or the enemy's, rode to Shibei. He first gave a standard military salute and then said with a smile, "Military commander, the battle is over. According to the preliminary statistics, we killed more than 4,000 enemies and captured more than 10,000 enemies. Only 5,000 of the enemy's cavalry managed to escape. We lost more than 2,000 people and 5,000 injured." After saying this, Kong Ji's left arm suddenly bled a lot. This was the mark left by the Walla cavalry's scimitar. "Haha, I wasn't paying attention and was stared at by mosquitoes." Regarding this, Kong Ji said with a look of indifference, "Good, this battle was very good. We showed the spirit of our new Second Army. Come, bandage Mr. Kong's wound. Everyone else, clean up the battlefield." Seeing that the blood was still flowing and didn't seem to have any intention of stopping, Shibei hurriedly shouted. Kong Ji went to rest, leaving behind many soldiers to clean up the battlefield. About an hour later, a large number of 5-star army cavalry came from the distance. Among them, the brothers of the 1st Cavalry Division were at the front. As the division commander, Tian, who took the lead and led a group of people to the front. When he saw the mess on the battlefield, the corpses that littered the ground and the blood that dyed the plains red, he could not help but nod his head. He could feel that the new Second Army must have used all their strength in this battle. "General Tian, thank you for your hard work." Shibei led a group of officers of the new Second Army to welcome him. "Commander Shibei, thank you for your hard work. There must have been a lot of casualties in this battle." Tian, who immediately saluted and then asked with a look of concern. Everyone knew that the new Second Army had just gone through an unforeseen event. Originally, the organization wasn't complete. Now that they had to fight such a fierce battle, it was already very difficult for them. Fortunately, our new Second Army isn't made of mud. We can hold on. Division Commander Kong Ji was afraid that the new Second Army would be looked down upon by others, so he took the initiative to stand up and answer. "Sai." However, Shibei waved his hand at Kong Ji and said to Tian, who, "General Tian, this is the division commander of the new Second Army's 1st Cavalry Division, Kong Ji. He is a bit straightforward. If he said anything that offended you, please don't take it to heart." The reason why he called Tian Hu general instead of division commander was that he was a major general. This was not something that an ordinary division commander could compare to. In fact, compared to his position in Bugnam of Gojoseon's heart, he was probably even lower than an ordinary division commander. Shibi was able to become the commander of the new Second Army in a way that came later, not only because his ability to command the army was good, but also because his EQ was very high. This could be seen from this conversation. "Oh, it's Mr. Kong. Sorry for the disrespect." Tian Hu smiled indifferently. Then he looked at Shibi and said, "I, Tian Hu, am not that petty. We are all comrades, so I won't take it to heart. And I really admire the new Second Army. At least, if it were our 1st Cavalry Division, we wouldn't be able to do it no matter what." Tian Hu's words were not meant to belittle them. They were all from the bottom of his heart. Yang Qindong said that the 1st Cavalry Division was the strongest cavalry brigade. They were an existence that would rather break than bend. In their division, there were only soldiers who died in battle. There were no kneeling captives. This was also their characteristic. Haha, General Tian is really praising us. We were also forced to do it. When talking about the past, there was a trace of shame on Shibi's face. No matter what, it's good to be able to persevere and hold on. How about this? We also seized 5,000 war horses during the Battle of the First City. Now, we will give them to the new Second Army. Take it as the 1st Cavalry Division's sponsorship to our brother's army. Please accept it, Commander Shibi." Tian Hu also laughed and then gave a generous gift. Chapter 1189. The 1st Cavalry Division always had 2 horses per person when they were on the road. If there were more, it would be difficult to take care of them. But how could they not pick up the horses that were abandoned on the road? And because they were at the front, they picked up some good stuff. Now that they had nowhere to put the horses, they decided to give them to the new Second Army. It could be considered a good karma, and it could also show the 1st Cavalry Division's sincerity. Hearing that there were 5,000 horses, Kong Ji's expression became much better. He finally knew that Tian Hu was not laughing at them, but was sincerely admiring them. Thank you very much," Shibi said with a touched expression. He also knew that if the other party brought too many war horses, it would affect their speed. But no matter what, he had to remember the favor of this gift of horses. Otherwise, they could have sent a troop to send the horses back. It would definitely be a great merit. The 5,000 war horses were quickly handed over. Considering that the Walla cavalry was already far away and that they had to chase after them, Tian Hu proposed to take his leave. She took out the limited food in the city to send the 1st Cavalry Division off. When he sent Tian Hu off, he asked tentatively, "General Tian, if I ask the 6th young master to join the battle, do you think he will agree?" Although the new Second Army's strength had been greatly reduced after going through a series of events, they had to fight if there was a chance to turn the situation around. Only in this way could the new Second Army's momentum be shown, and they could get rid of the humiliation of surrendering to Bai Ming earlier. Tian Hu naturally saw this clearly, so he did not choose to remain silent. Instead, he said after thinking for a while, "Those 5,000 horses can be used as entrance tickets if they are properly trained." "Oh, thank you, General Tian, for reminding me." She was stunned at first, but then he understood the meaning of these words. Obviously, Tian Hu was reminding him that as long as there were enough cavalry and enough elites, they would have a chance to participate in the battle against the Walla. The 1st Cavalry Division finally left. Seeing the departing army, Division Commander Kong Ji sighed and said, "I didn't expect the division commander of the world's No. 1 Cavalry Division to be so humble. He doesn't have any arrogance at all. Also, he has sincerely helped our new Second Army." "You're right. General Tian is indeed a straightforward person. Perhaps his vision has long surpassed ours. In his eyes, he wants to conquer the world with the 6th young master. Only such a person is worthy of being the commander of the 1st Cavalry Division." Tian, who didn't know what Shibi and Kong Ji were saying about him, At this moment, he was hurrying on his way to the battlefield as he called the 5 commanders over to assign them combat missions. When we march, we must put the scouts further away. Do you remember how we were ambushed by the 6th young master? At that time, it was all thanks to the 6th young master showing mercy. Otherwise, our 1st Cavalry Division's reputation would have been tarnished. Therefore, I want to tell everyone that there's always someone better than you. Any actions or thoughts that look down on your opponents are unacceptable. If anyone dares to have such thoughts, then get out of the 1st Cavalry Division. We don't accept people who are arrogant and have no ability. When he said this, Tian, whose face was solemn, and he was very serious. This was also a problem that he had just discovered. When he was in Shajing City, facing the new Second Army, which had a history of repeated failures, his soldiers showed a sense of superiority. They didn't pay attention to others when they spoke, and some of them didn't even talk to others. This made the officers of the new Second Army feel very embarrassed. But from beginning to end, the commander-in-chief had never once complained to him. Just because others didn't complain didn't mean that it didn't happen. At that time, Tian, who considered that this was an internal matter of his division, so he didn't say anything. Now that he finally had the chance, he couldn't hold back and vented his anger to the 5 regimental commanders. Don't think that you're the best in the world. What did we rely on to have our current achievements? It's our comrade in arms, the 6th young master, who gave us preferential policies. Think about it. When did we not choose first when there were good soldiers? When there were good equipment, we didn't use it first. When there were good horses, we didn't choose first. Even if there were good food and drinks, we were the first to choose first. With this kind of full protection, even if we didn't do it, there would still be others who would do it, and they might even do it well. Therefore, everything that we have now has absolutely nothing to do with our own efforts. Do you understand? Regimental commanders, go back and check yourselves. When you rest during the march, you'll start criticizing and self-criticizing activities. If there's anyone who doesn't have a deep enough understanding, you'll have to help them understand. If they don't change, they'll be kicked out of our 1st Cavalry Division. All right, there's no room for discussion on this matter. You can organize yourselves. However, I'm going to do a spot check to see which regimental commanders didn't do well. I won't find trouble with the battalion commanders, company commanders, platoon commanders, squad leaders, or soldiers. I'll only find you regimental commanders. If you don't meet the standards, I'll consider requesting the 6th young master to transfer you out of the 1st Cavalry Division after the war. His words were ruthless. Directly transferring out of the 1st Cavalry Division was tantamount to cutting off his future path of advancement and hope. The regimental commanders, who originally didn't care much about it, immediately became more serious, especially the 1st Regiment Commander Temu and the 3rd Regiment Commander Hubo They were both uncouth men who didn't care much about this kind of ideological education. Just now, they were thinking of going through the process to get away with it. But now, they didn't dare to have such thoughts anymore. Everyone knew that if they were really kicked out of the 1st Cavalry Division because of this matter, they wouldn't have the face to see anyone. Even with their contributions, if they were to go to other divisions, it would be difficult for them to raise their heads. In this meeting, Tian, who was just expressing his thoughts. However, he didn't know how important this meeting was to the future development of the 1st Cavalry Division. This was equivalent to making up for their biggest shortcoming. When courage and carefulness were combined, when courage and modesty were combined, when powerful combat strength and a strong heart complemented each other, they would become the most difficult opponent to defeat. During the Ming dynasty, Ili Belly was a part of the Chagatai Khanate of the Yuan dynasty. Crooked Thoughts became its first king. He moved his people west to the Ili River Valley, which is the current Yining region of Xinjiang, and changed the name to Ili Belly. Ili was another transliteration of Ili, and Belly referred to Bali. In 1432 AD, Crooked Thoughts died, and his descendants fought for the throne. The country split into Ili Belly Yarkyang, and Turfan. One of the descendants still used the name of Ilibeli and became a subordinate country of the Ming dynasty. Yarkyang was south of Tian Shan, east of Tsong Mountains, and west of Bosan Lake. The other was centered around Turfan. Ili Banli King Baolai, the thing he wanted to do the most in his life was to reunite Ili Banli and bring the legacy of his ancestors to greater heights. For this, he did not hesitate to lower his head to the Ming dynasty and even used Alipu to develop and strengthen himself. In history, Alipu did well, helping King Baolai make Ili Beli strong, and he became the leader of the three. Even after he grew old, Ili Beli lasted for dozens of years before dying. However, in this life, Yang Xie's sudden rise, especially the rapid development of the five-star army, changed the original history. Especially after the battle with the five-star army, Ili Beli had lost a lot of soldiers and generals, and their strength had been greatly reduced. 80,000 of the original 230,000 troops had been eaten, and now there were only 150,000 left. Even though during this period of time, under Alipu's hard work, he had recruited 50,000 new troops, and the size of the army had reached 200,000. However, compared to before, it was not as strong as before, and it attracted the attention of Yarkyang and Turfan. This made King Baolai sigh as he was getting further and further away from his life goal. When it rains, it pours. On this night, it was raining heavily outside the palace. Hurried footsteps could be heard coming from the depths of the palace. A bolt of lightning flashed and illuminated the figure of this person. Who else could it be but Prime Minister Alipu? The person who came was Alipu. He had just received the intel from the scouts, and he was urgently looking for the king to discuss matters. King Baolai, who had already rested, was woken up by the servants. He changed into his king attire and saw Alipu in the small hall. When he saw the intel that was sent over, his brows furrowed, showing the anxiety and uneasiness in his heart regarding the Wara sending troops to Shur City and working with the Baiming army to deal with the five-star army. King Baolai had known about it long ago. He had always been conflicted about this matter. As far as he was concerned, whether it was the five-star army or the Wara, they were not easy to deal with. As such, no matter who won or lost, it would not be a good thing for him. If either side expanded, they could threaten him at any time, unless the Baiming army won. This was a powerful but unambitious country. As long as they submitted to them in name, they would be able to live freely and do what they wanted to do. Because of this, he had asked Alipu about the Baiming army's chances of winning. Alipu's answer was less than 20%. He also said that even if the Baiming army won, it would be difficult for them to expand. After all, the great Ming dynasty was not just the Baiming army, but there was also the southern Ming dynasty. Dealing with internal problems was the most important thing for them to do. This answer was not what Baolai wanted to hear. However, since they were small and weak, even if they did not like it, they could only wait for the final victor to appear. They could only hope that no matter who won, it would be a Pyrrhic victory. This would give them more time to develop. Now the results were finally out. The five-star army had won, and the Walla army had fled towards their base in Hanoi. Chapter 1190. King Baolai didn't expect this. What he didn't expect was that the five-star army actually chased after them for thousands of miles without any intention of stopping. This naturally caught his attention. The Han people had a saying, "Without the lips, the teeth will feel cold." Hanoi was too close to Ili. If they really fought their way here, they would unknowingly become a threat to their borders. If that really happened, the five-star army would probably attack them. If that was really the case, they had to prepare in advance. Apu appeared here to talk about this matter. He looked at Baolai with a worried expression and said, "Your Majesty, the five-star army's way of doing things is quite similar to our ancestors. They really pull out their swords at the slightest disagreement. We have to be careful. Normally, The most important thing between countries was politics. When there was no way to make peace, only when things escalated to the extreme would there be war. This was also the norm when countries interacted with each other. Usually they would scold each other, but they wouldn't easily send out their troops. That would be a sign of wasting people's money and causing the economy to deteriorate. Everyone understood this principle. However, it was still broken by someone. Just like the Mongolian Empire, they didn't reason with anyone. They just attacked. Often, when countries were still waiting for diplomatic communication, the Mongolian cavalry had already killed their way into the city. This was also one of the reasons why the Mongolian Empire was able to occupy so much territory in such a short period of time. After all, many people couldn't understand the way they attacked without saying anything. In comparison, the five-star army was very similar. They also sent out their troops without saying anything. The only difference was that they had a good reason to send out their troops. Moreover, they treated the people in the occupied land very well. They also put in a lot of effort to develop the local economy. This was also why the backline was generally very stable and didn't have any major problems. However, no matter how good the five-star army treated the people in the occupied land, it didn't mean anything to a king like Bao Lide. People like him cared more about the royal and imperial power. As long as the people were able to live, it didn't matter. With an ugly expression, Bao Lide put down the information, looked up at a lip, and asked Xianghua, "Do you think that if the five-star army defeats Yeshen, they will attack us?" Judging from their past habits, it's very likely. Who told us to be weak? Apu didn't want to say this, but it was the truth. Their territory was small and their population was small. It was undoubtedly difficult for them to develop greatly in this limited environment. Even though he worked late into the night every day, he was still unable to completely turn the situation around. That's right, we're really too weak. If it was before the split, we would have had a chance to fight against the five-star army. Bao Lide sighed and admitted the truth. When Bao Lide mentioned before the split, Ali's eyes lit up. He looked at Bao Lide expectantly and said, "Your Majesty, you mean, that's right. It's time to contact the Yarkyang and Turfan tribes. Although we all want to eat each other, when this kind of survival is threatened, I think they will also put down their prejudices and work together like me." Bao Lide was worthy of being able to appoint a wise minister like Apu. His wisdom and boldness were few and far between. A look of admiration appeared on Arab's face as he nodded heavily. "All right, allow this subject to contact them." "Yes, but it must be done quickly. After all, this is a three-way alliance. It will take a lot of time to adjust and coordinate. What we lack right now is time." Bao Lide looked at Apu solemnly as he spoke in a heavy voice. Apu nodded and asked the king about the alliance. After all, it involved too many things, so every step of the plan had to be done carefully. Otherwise, it would be fine if nothing went wrong. But if something did go wrong, it would be a big problem. The five-star army hadn't even fought with the Wara chief, Yeshen, yet the Ili had already been on high alert. This was somewhat unexpected to Yang Qindong, and it was a major hindrance to his plan to take over this place. And no one knew about this yet. Not even the spies that Yang Xie's intelligence agency had planted in the Ili had received any information. Their intelligence agents were currently investigating the situation in Baiming's capital, especially the reaction of the Baiming imperial court after Shiheng's defeat. Baiming's capital, in the main hall of the imperial palace, a group of dancers were singing and dancing. There were dozens of tables on their left and right, and each table had an important official of the imperial court sitting there. They were eating delicious food, drinking wine, and enjoying the dance of the beautiful women. It was a very pleasant scene. Sitting in the main hall of the imperial palace, Zhu Qiyu was very pleased with himself. A few days ago, he had received a report from the 6th Li Hundred from the front line of the first city, saying that the first city was about to be taken and the five-star army's spies in the grasslands would be removed. At that time, the grasslands to the west of Baiming would become safe again. As the Emperor of Ming, he could sit back and relax. He could then focus all his energy on the southern Ming Empire and unify it. This was undoubtedly good news for Zhu Qiu, who had been in constant trouble since he took office. In order to express his happiness, he had held a banquet in the main hall for 3 days to express his gratitude to his officials for their support. People said that horses galloped when they were flushed with success, but they did not know that flushed with success could cause horses to stumble. While Zhu Qiu was hosting a banquet for the officials, a young eunuch came to the side of the main hall with a flustered expression. He then winked at Ming, the head eunuch who was standing next to the emperor. Ming was serving the emperor, pouring wine for him. From time to time, she would tell a few jokes to amuse the emperor. He suddenly noticed the young eunuch's abnormal behavior and was very angry. He had already decided that if it was not something important, he would punish this young eunuch later. This young eunuch was too blind. Taking advantage of the fact that the emperor was watching the dance and was not paying attention to her, Ming walked to the side of the hall and said to the young eunuch, "Speak, what is it?" "I'll tell you if it is not something important. You little monkey can wait to be beaten." The young eunuch did not care about Jin Ying's threat at all. With a nervous expression and a trembling voice, he said, "Chief eunuch, things are not good. Admiral Shiheng's army has been defeated. They have now retreated to Tulu City. This is the memorial they submitted. It was sent here at the speed of 800 miles. What? Even though Jin had served several emperors and claimed to be experienced and knowledgeable, his expression changed greatly. He had not expected things to turn out like this. Didn't the memorial say that the beginning city could not hold on and was about to be taken? How could there be a turn so quickly and such a huge change at that? Jin didn't quite believe it. She took the urgent document and read it carefully, and when he saw it, he almost fell to the ground. Looking at the contents, it was even worse than the young eunuch's. Jin wanted to calm down, but he found that he could not. He could only walk toward the throne room with heavy feet. At that moment, he did not know that his expression was frighteningly ugly. Cold sweat was even running down his neck. Dai Zong was so happy that he didn't notice any of this. His gaze was still on the dancers. When Jin came close to him and handed him the memorial, he casually pushed it away. "What time is this? I won't look at the memorial first. Let's talk about it later." Your Majesty, you should look at it now," Jin said with difficulty. Jin braced herself as she spoke. A eunuch actually dared to disobey the emperor's orders. That was a capital offense. But at that moment he had no other choice. He knew that if he really suppressed this memorial, it would be time to punish him. Jin had actually disobeyed an edict. This finally attracted Dai Zong's attention. He saw that the hands that were handing over the memorial were trembling. Suddenly, he had a bad feeling. With a solemn expression, he reached out and took the memorial. Then he flipped through it. After about 10 breaths, he suddenly roared in anger. "Trash! A bunch of trash!" The sudden rage of the emperor caused the originally peaceful main hall to fall into silence. The musicians stopped playing. The dancers were also trembling in fear. They stood in a corner of the hall, not knowing what to do. "Leave, all of you leave." Jin took the opportunity to wave his hand at the musicians and dancers. The main hall returned to silence. Then all the officials focused their gazes on the acting emperor, Zhu Qiu, whose face was red from holding back his anger. No one knew what had happened to make the emperor so angry. "Here, let them take a look." After a pin-drop silence in the main hall, Zhu Qiu finally reacted. He took the memorial and threw it to Jin, who was standing at the side with his back hunched. "Your subject obeys." Jin agreed. Then he took the memorial and walked down the hall. He handed it to Su Yozhen, who was standing at the first position on the left. Su Yozhen reached out to take it. He opened it and read it. Then he sucked in a breath of cold air. After 2 breaths of silence, he handed the memorial to the other important officials. Shiheng was defeated. The 5-star army won again. Not only did they solve the siege of Beginning City, but they also launched a fierce counterattack. When it rains, it pours. Even Shajing and Jingzhou City, which had previously submitted to Ming, rebelled. They were returned to the 5-star army. This meant that the long period of planning was all for naught. So much effort and money invested had turned into ashes. It was no wonder that the emperor was so angry. Chapter 1191. A few moments later, many of the officials who had read the memorials had grave expressions. They could clearly see the severity of the situation. Many of them were even thinking, if the 5-star army used the momentum of their victory to suddenly attack Tulu City, what would they do? Would Shi Hung, who had already suffered defeat, be able to defend the city? If he couldn't defend it, once the 5-star army broke in, the Ming army would be forced into an internal battle. This was an extremely dangerous matter. Once Ming's capital was attacked, it would affect their own interests and safety. The officials had no choice but to take this matter seriously. Of course, there were also people like Su Yojin, who had long since submitted to Yang Qindong. He pretended to have a grave expression on his face, but he was actually very happy on the inside. For him, once the 5-star army entered the city, he would openly become a high-ranking official of the Yangxia. He might even be treated even better. You've all read it. Tell me, how should we deal with this? During this time, Zhu Qiyu had already steadied her mind. When she looked at the ministers, her eyes were full of hope. Your Majesty, Tulu City is a gateway. We can't lose it. Your Majesty, Shi Heng's defeat cannot be avoided. He should be heavily punished and replaced with a new commander. Your Majesty, the 5-star army is coming with menacing momentum and cannot be resisted. There's no harm in sending someone to talk to him and see if he can be persuaded to withdraw. Your Majesty, after Zhu Qiyu asked this question, there were all kinds of comments below. There were all kinds of suggestions, which made people feel a little dizzy after listening to them. Zhu Qiyu had no choice but to roar, "Enough! All of you shut up! We are the emperor, and Yang Qindong is just a lowly bugnom of Gojosian. We even conferred him the title, so how can we lower our heads to him? Let's not talk about peace talks anymore. As for replacing the commander, do you have any suitable candidates in mind?" After expressing that he would not lower his head to Yang Qindong, he asked about the candidate for the new commander. At this moment, the entire hall was so silent that a pin drop could be heard. Although Shi Hung was a little greedy for money and power, it had to be said that he still had some skills in war. Moreover, over the years, he had already built up enough prestige in the army. How could Ming have a backup for such a handsome man? Now that it was said that there was a change in leadership, who would be able to take on this important responsibility? After asking, there was no response for a long time. Zhu Qiyu knew that it was impossible to change the commander. In this case, he had to settle for the second best and said, "Everyone has read the memorial. Although Marquis Wukinghow has the leadership responsibility this time, he is not the main reason. He is still in his position. Let's forget about the proposal of changing the commander. Now, let's talk about the problem of how to defend Tulu City first. If anyone has any opinions, feel free to raise them." Zhu Qiyu also knew that there were people in the imperial court who had a close relationship with Shi Hung. If he showed that he wanted to change the commander or did not trust him, these words would inevitably spread out. This would have a negative effect on his control over Shi Hung. This was not what he wanted to see now. Naturally, they would be punished after losing the battle. However, how to punish them and when to punish them still needed to be discussed at length. At least in the current situation, they absolutely could not be punished. Not only that, they also needed to be rewarded to stabilize the people's hearts. This was the so-called way of using people. Send troops, a large number of reinforcements. Don't we have millions of soldiers in training? Pick some of the elites and send them to Tulu City. No matter what, we have to defend it. With the high walls and thick city walls, we can fight an offensive and defensive battle like the first city. As long as the battle lasts for a long time, with strong strength, the 5-star army will be defeated in the end. The Minister of War, Ming, stood up and put forward his own opinion. As the Minister of War, Ming's authority was even greater than that of the previous Minister of War. This was all because Ming took on a large number of training troops to prepare for war. Anyway, he was very comfortable and proud as the Minister of War. Yes, Minister is right. I think that not only should we send troops to defend the city, but we can also find an opportunity to fight outside the city. In this way, we may be able to catch the 5-star army by surprise. It is not impossible to regain the initiative on the battlefield. Your Majesty, no matter what, the first city has been besieged for a long time. After such a long defensive battle, its strength should be at its weakest. We can't miss this opportunity. Grand Young Master Fu, Grand Scholar, and Minister of Justice Su Yozhen also stood up and put forward their opinions. Hearing that they would take the initiative to attack and catch the 5-star army off guard, Zhu Qiyu's eyes couldn't help but brighten. He looked at Su Yozhen with admiration and said, Minister Su's words are reasonable. Minister we might as well do it. Inform Shi Hung to find an opportunity to fight outside the city. Yes, Ming immediately agreed. The originally celebratory court banquet thus ended. Everyone had a lot on their minds. They only hoped that Shi Hung could turn the tide and allow them to continue to abuse their power in the capital. However, when one official walked out of the hall, he was extremely worried. He was the Minister of Revenue, Jin Lian. As the saying goes, before the troops and horses move, the provisions move first. Once he increased the number of troops sent to Tulu, it would involve tens of millions of money and provisions. This was his responsibility and also his source of worry. Not long ago, he gave the provisions that he had saved not long ago to General Li Tong in the Liaodong region. Although he had some now, it was beyond his ability to provide for hundreds of thousands of troops. In the face of such a large army that suddenly set out, where would he get the provisions? It was about to enter autumn. This year's provisions had not been completely conquered. If the army's expedition was delayed because of this, wouldn't he be a sinner? After leaving the imperial palace, Jin Lian gravely said, Come on, let's not go back to the residence. Let's go straight to the Su residence. In the end, he decided to discuss this matter with Su Yozhen. Back then, it had been Su Yozhen who had suggested that he send provisions to Li Tong. Now that there was a problem, he naturally wanted to hear his opinion. Within the Su residence, Su Yozhen had only just entered when the steward came to report that the Minister of Revenue, Jin Lian, had arrived and was waiting outside. Oh, so fast? Su Yozhen's expression did not change as he smiled and said, Minister Jin, please come to the main hall for a talk. Su Yozhen and Jin Lian met in the main hall, and the latter sighed. Lord Su, you've really made me suffer this time. Su Yozhen feigned ignorance and asked, Lord Jin, did you say this? Oh, Lord Su, do you still remember how you suggested that I send provisions to General Li Tong in the Liaodong region? Jin Lian had no idea that Su Yozhen was feigning ignorance, only that he had been so busy that he had forgotten, so he reminded him. Oh, there was such a matter. At that time, General Li Tong sent someone to find my steward and gave him 20,000 taels of silver. Oh, right. Didn't I give Lord Jin 10,000 taels? What, is there something else? Su Yozhen purposely mentioned the 10,000 taels of silver to tell Jin Lian that he had accepted a bribe. If this matter was blown out of proportion, it would not be good for anyone. Jin Lian was stunned. He had also forgotten about the 10,000 taels of silver. Now that he thought about it, it was not that the time had not come yet. For a moment, his tone weakened. Lord Su, you're right. However, the Emperor wants to send troops to attack the 5-star army. How much provisions would that require? Our Ministry of Revenue does not have that much. You don't have any. Su Yojin had already sent people to investigate the Ministry of Revenue's warehouse, but he still pretended to be ignorant. Yes, we don't. I'm not afraid of Lord Su's ridicule, but in the past few years our Ming has expanded the army quickly, putting great pressure on our Ministry of Revenue. Although we have some now, it is only for daily training. Once it is used in battle, it will not be enough. When Jean Lien said this, he was about to cry. In contrast to the Minister of War, Ming, the other, was very satisfied. His Ministry of Revenue had always been tight. If he had not intentionally saved from all sides, there would have been problems long ago. Ming was a qualified official. At least, he was very good at saving money. It was a pity that even the cleverest housewife could not cook without rice. He did not have any good ideas. These words were very pitiful, but in Su Yojin's ears he said with an indifferent expression, "Since it's not enough, then just report it directly." Directly report it. Lord Su is saying report it to the emperor? As if he had misheard, Ming asked with his mouth wide open. Of course it is to report it to the emperor. I say, Lord Yi, the food was indeed given to General Li Tong. There is nothing shameful about it. In any case, as the Minister of Revenue, you have already done your best. Our wise emperor can understand. Su Yojin appeared very relaxed. He wasn't trying to shirk his responsibility. Instead, it was his sincere way of dealing with the situation. After all, the amount of food they lacked was too great. Today, Zhu Qiyu's intention was not to send 30 to 50,000. It was very likely that he would send 100,000 or 200,000 would be normal. With so many people, how much food would they need? Even if they could find a way to get some, it would not be a solution after a long time. Thus, reporting it was a matter of time. Since it was so, it was better to report it in the morning. This could be considered as pouring cold water on Dai Zong. It also let him know that fighting a war was not as simple as just talking. It needed money and food. If they were not willing to spend money, they would not be able to fight a war, much less win a war. Su Yojin said twice to report the matter to the emperor, and Ming finally faced it seriously. After careful consideration, it seemed that this was the only path he could take. Although it was inevitable that he would be reprimanded if he reported it like this, and he might even be punished, he was not an immortal. He could not conjure food, so he could only do this. Well, Lord Su, I will report to the emperor tomorrow, but I will have to trouble Lord Su to help me beat the drum. Now, who doesn't know that the emperor relies on Lord Su very much? This time you have to save me. Well said, well said. Tomorrow I will meet the emperor with Lord Yi. It just so happens that I have something to report to the emperor. Su Yojin nodded. He urgently needed to complete the task handed over by Yang Qindong, so he had to get the first-hand information. If he could go with Ming, he would owe him a favor and get the information. Wouldn't it be the best of both worlds? You're tuning in to the Thunder Spear YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.